3 months after my wedding, my mother no longer had access to my grandmother's money, and my sister was sitting across from an attorney, trying to explain payments no one in our family had ever thought to compare against my work calendar. If you had asked me then, when everything started to crack, I wouldn't have said the lawyer's office, the bank statements, or the afternoon Grandma signed away my mother's authority. I would have said it started with a slice of wedding cake my mother took out of my hand before my husband and I ever got to taste it. Before I tell you how that single plate turned into the beginning of the biggest reckoning my family had ever faced, I hope you're doing well wherever you're listening from. Stay with me, because what happened 10 minutes after that cake was only the first thing my parents weren't prepared for. And if stories about family favoritism, buried truths, and consequences are your kind of thing, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what came next. Our wedding was on a warm Saturday in June, at a hotel ballroom in the western suburbs of Chicago. Ethan and I had paid for most of it ourselves, which mattered more than I realized at the time because it meant every contract, every schedule change, and every decision ultimately came back to us. My parents had contributed a generous gift, but they had no control over the venue, the coordinator, or the program. I had insisted on that from the beginning, not because I expected a disaster, but because I knew my mother well enough to know that if she were given 1 inch of official authority, she could turn it into a committee. By the time we reached the cake cutting, I was finally beginning to relax. The ceremony had gone beautifully. Ethan had cried halfway through his vows, which I had privately hoped he might, but would never have admitted out loud. Grandma Dorothy had made it through the afternoon without overdoing it, moving carefully with her cane and refusing every offer to wheel her anywhere. My mother, Susan, had been unusually restrained. My father, Mark, had made only one comment about the seating chart. Amanda had arrived on time, looked beautiful, and for once had not asked me to change anything at the last minute. That should have warned me. The cake itself was not enormous or theatrical. Ethan and I had chosen a 3-tier lemon and vanilla cake with white buttercream and simple flowers, because neither of us wanted to spend a small fortune on something people would photograph for 6 minutes and eat in. 4. What mattered to me was the first slice. My grandparents had always made a small ceremony of sharing the first piece at anniversaries. And when Grandpa was alive, he used to joke that if Grandma ever handed him the smaller forkful, he would know the marriage was in trouble. Ethan had heard that story enough times that when we planned our reception, he was the one who said we should keep it. We stood behind the cake table with the photographer angled just off my right shoulder. Ethan had one hand over mine on the knife. The room was still noisy from dinner, but enough people had gathered around that I could hear my aunt laughing near the front and one of Ethan's college friends telling somebody to get out of the photographer's shot. We cut through the bottom tier, lifted the first piece onto a plate, and I turned slightly toward Ethan. He never got the fork. My mother stepped between us so smoothly that for half a second I thought she was helping move a napkin. She took the plate directly from my hand and turned toward Amanda. "Here," she said. "This one should be yours." Amanda blinked. It was only a second. Maybe less. That pause stayed with me because it told me she had not expected it either. Then she took the plate. My father raised his champagne glass as if this had been planned. Just a small change in family tradition. A few people laughed. Not cruelly. Not knowingly. They thought it was one of those odd little family jokes outsiders smile through because they assume there is context they are missing. I looked at my mother. She was smiling at Amanda, not at me. Amanda held the plate with both hands. The piece Ethan and I had just cut sat untouched between us, except it was no longer between us at all. For one sharp second, I felt a dozen responses crowd into my throat. I could have taken the plate back. I could have said no. I could have told my mother exactly where she could put her new tradition. I was not afraid of her. I had not spent my adult life obeying every demand she made. In fact, by then I had become quite good at telling my family no. I had my own career, my own money, my own home with Ethan, and a wedding contract my parents had never been allowed to touch. The problem was not that I didn't know how to fight. The problem was that I knew exactly what kind of fight my mother had just offered me. If I grabbed the plate out of Amanda's hands, Susan would have widened her eyes and said she had only been trying to include my sister. If I raised my voice, Mark would have told me not to make a scene. If Amanda cried, the story would become how I had humiliated her over a piece of cake. My wedding would disappear under the explanation. Ethan leaned closer. "Want me to get it back?" His voice was low enough that only I could hear. I looked at Amanda again. She still had not taken a bite. Then I said, "Not here." Ethan watched me for another second, making sure I meant it, then nodded. That mattered to me. He did not leap in front of me like I needed rescuing, and he did not tell me to let it go. He asked what I wanted and accepted the answer. My mother apparently took my silence as permission to continue. Amanda deserves something sweet after everything she's done for this family. There it was. Not just cake. Not just a joke. Everything she's done. Across the room, Grandma Dorothy stopped smiling. That was when I looked at her. She was seated near the front with her cane resting against the chair beside her. At 81, she had a way of becoming very still when she was angry. She did not purse her lips or shake her head. She simply stopped giving you any expression to work with. Our eyes met. I cannot honestly tell you that I knew exactly what she was thinking. I didn't. What I knew was that she had heard my mother's sentence the same way I had. Amanda had been praised for everything she'd done for Grandma for more than a year. I had already begun to realize that some of that praise did not match reality. What I did not know yet was how far the mismatch went. Amanda finally lifted the fork. "Sarah, I can give it back if you want." Her tone was awkward rather than smug, which somehow irritated me more. Because that meant she knew it was strange. She knew it belonged to Ethan and me, and she was still holding it. I smiled without warmth. "You already have it." Mom gave a little laugh. "See? Nobody's upset." I looked at her. I didn't say that. Her smile tightened, only slightly. Then the photographer, who had the survival instincts of someone who had probably seen much worse weddings than mine, said, "Let's get one more shot of the bride and groom." Ethan stepped back beside me. My mother moved away. Amanda carried the plate with her. The photographer repositioned us, and I forced myself to look toward the camera. Ethan's hand settled at my waist. I could feel the tension in his fingers, even though his face looked calm. "Do you want 5 minutes?" he murmured. "No." "You sure?" Yes, I was. At least about that. I was not going to surrender the next half hour of my own reception because my mother wanted to test what she could take without consequence. The DJ shifted the music. A server rolled the cake table back so staff could begin plating dessert. People drifted toward their seats. I spoke to Ethan's aunt, thanked 2 of my coworkers for coming, and let the photographer pull us through another cluster of pictures. Outwardly, the reception moved on. Inside, something had changed. I kept replaying the sentence. Amanda deserves something sweet after everything she's done for this family. It connected too neatly with what I had been hearing for months. Amanda was wonderful with Grandma. Amanda had rearranged her life. Amanda was the one who showed up. Except I had driven Grandma to the orthopedic follow-up Susan mentioned at Easter. I had stayed with her during the medication reaction Mom told relatives Amanda had helped her through. I had moved meetings at work when Amanda canceled appointments that could not easily be rescheduled. Amanda did help Grandma. That part was true. But somewhere along the way, Amanda helps Grandma had become Amanda is the person taking care of Grandma. Those were not the same statement. About 5 minutes after the cake cutting, I saw Grandma stand. She did not come toward me. She walked slowly toward Claire, our wedding coordinator. Claire bent down slightly so Grandma would not have to raise her voice. They spoke for less than a minute. At first, I assumed Grandma needed help getting somewhere. Then Claire looked directly at me. She excused herself from Grandma and crossed the room. "Sarah, quick question." I glanced at Ethan. "Okay. Your grandmother wants to speak before your father." I looked past Claire. Grandma was still standing where Claire had left her. "What does she want to say?" Claire shook her head. "She didn't tell me. She just asked if she could go first. Your dad is scheduled after dessert." I had spent enough time planning that reception to know Claire would not change the order without checking. Ethan and I were the clients. The schedule belonged to us. I looked at Grandma again. She met my eyes. There was nothing confused about her expression. I had no idea what she planned to say. I also knew she had never hijacked a room in her life. She was not impulsive. She was not dramatic. And she had heard my mother's comment at the cake table. I nodded. Let her go first. Claire gave a professional smile. Got it. She walked away. Ethan waited until she was out of earshot. You know what this is about? No. Are you worried? Yes. He gave the faintest smile. Want to stop it? I thought about that. Then I looked at Grandma again. No. The next few minutes passed strangely. Dessert plates appeared. The photographer disappeared to get detail shots. Amanda had returned to her table. The first slice was still on the plate in front of her. Half eaten now. I noticed because I could not stop noticing. My mother sat beside her, speaking in low tones. Dad was at the far side of the room with several pages folded in one hand. His speech? I had seen him carrying those pages earlier, but I had never read them. At the time, I did not know Grandma had. I only knew that about 10 minutes after my mother had taken the cake from me, Dad stood and buttoned his jacket. The DJ lowered the music. Claire moved toward the side of the room. Dad started walking toward the microphone. The spotlight remained dark. He slowed. The MC picked up the microphone. Before we hear from the father of the bride, we have one small change to the order. I almost laughed at the wording. One small change. My father did not. He looked toward Claire. Claire looked at me. I gave her the smallest nod. Then the MC said, Dorothy Bennett would like to say a few words. Grandma rose. My mother turned so quickly toward her that the chair legs scraped the floor. Mom? Grandma picked up her cane. I heard him. I thought Dad was next, Amanda said. He was, I said. My mother looked at me. You changed the schedule? I approved it. For what? I met her eyes. We're about to find out. Grandma reached the microphone. Claire adjusted the stand. My father remained only a few feet away, still holding his printed speech. For the first time that night, he looked uncertain. Grandma rested one hand on the podium and looked around the ballroom. She began quietly. I wasn't planning to give a speech tonight. There were a few soft laughs. She waited. Then she looked toward my father. Before Mark tells everyone who has been taking care of me this year, I think the person being taken care of should be allowed to speak first. The room changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But conversations stopped. Forks went down. My mother's face went blank. Dad looked at the pages in his hand. Amanda stared at Grandma. I felt Ethan's fingers close around mine under the table. Grandma continued. Last September, when I had a follow-up with my orthopedic surgeon and the appointment was moved with less than a day's notice, Sarah changed her work schedule and drove me. She looked at me. In November, when a new medication made me sick in the middle of the night, Sarah stayed with me until morning. My throat tightened. In February, when I had another appointment that was difficult to reschedule, Sarah went again because the person who had planned to take me could not. Amanda dropped her eyes. Grandma did not look at her when she said the next part. I'm grateful for every time Amanda helped me. My mother exhaled. Too early. Grandma continued. But I won't let anyone thank her for things Sarah did. The silence after that sentence was so complete, I could hear glassware being stacked in the service hallway beyond the ballroom doors. Mom stood halfway out of her chair. Mom, you're confused. Grandma turned her head. She did not raise her voice. No, Susan, I'm old. Those are not the same thing. Someone near the back coughed. Amanda's face had gone red. Dad folded his speech pages once more, though they were already folded. My mother sat down. Grandma finished by saying something kind about Ethan and me. Something I barely heard because my pulse was pounding in my ears. She wished us patience, laughter, and enough sense not to let other people define our marriage for us. Then she stepped away. Claire helped her back toward her table. Dad remained near the microphone. He looked at me. I knew what he wanted. Permission to continue. Maybe to explain. Maybe to smooth it over. Maybe to read the speech anyway. I stood. We're done with speeches. Dad stared at me. Sarah. I looked toward the MC. Please move us to the next thing. The MC nodded immediately. The DJ brought the music back up. I did not give my father the microphone. I did not demand an apology from Amanda. I did not ask Grandma to explain more. That was still my wedding. and whatever had just surfaced was not going to swallow the rest of it. For the next hour, I danced with Ethan, spoke to guests, and let my mother sit with the consequences of calling an 81-year-old woman confused in front of an entire ballroom only to have that woman calmly correct her. I wish I could tell you that was the end of it. It was not even close. Near the end of the reception, after several guests had already left, my mother caught me in the corridor outside the ballroom. Her face had lost every trace of the smile she had worn at the cake table. You have no idea what you just let her start. I was tired, my feet hurt, and I had stopped being interested in pretending I did not understand when she was threatening me. I let Grandma speak. Susan glanced toward the ballroom doors. And now she thinks she can question every decision I've made for her. I stared at her. That sentence did more to wake me up than the cake, the speech, or the look on Amanda's face. Because my mother had not said Grandma was embarrassed. She had not said Amanda was hurt. She had not even said I had ruined the reception. She had said Grandma might start questioning decisions. What decisions? I asked. Mom's expression changed. Only for a second. Then she said, "This is exactly what I mean. You don't know what you're getting involved in." At the time, I thought she was trying to scare me away from a family argument. I didn't know yet that some of those decisions had dollar amounts attached to them. Grandma's hip fracture happened 18 months before the wedding, in December of 2023, long before I had any reason to connect Amanda's name with money. At the time, the only thing any of us were thinking about was getting Dorothy through surgery and rehab, without making her feel as though one bad fall had turned her into a helpless old woman. She had slipped in her kitchen early one morning while carrying a mug to the sink. By the time Dad called me, she was already at the hospital, furious that everyone kept referring to her as the patient while she was sitting right there listening. That was Grandma. Even in pain, she wanted to know who had moved her purse and why nobody had asked before taking her coat off the chair. The surgery went well, but the weeks afterward were harder than she had expected. Dorothy had always lived alone after Grandpa died, and independence was not something she described as a preference. It was simply how she saw herself. Rehab frustrated her because every task she had once done without thinking suddenly came with someone standing beside her, asking whether she felt steady. She hated the walker. She hated being told to wait before standing. She hated the laminated fall prevention sheets taped near her bed. What she did not hate was work. If the therapist gave her 10 repetitions, she did 12. By late January, she had progressed enough that everyone began discussing what her life would look like after discharge. That was where I naturally became involved. I was a senior project manager, which meant my entire professional life revolved around schedules, dependencies, people promising things they had no realistic plan to deliver, and the unpleasant consequences of pretending all of that would somehow resolve itself. Organizing Grandma's follow-up care did not intimidate me. What I did not want was to become the person everyone automatically called for every grocery bag, pharmacy run, or light bulb that needed changing. I loved Dorothy. I also had a full-time job, a home with Ethan, and a wedding we had recently started planning. I had learned by then that loving my family did not require being permanently available to them. At the rehab facility, we sat around a small conference table with a discharge coordinator and divided the responsibilities. Mom volunteered to handle bills, insurance, paperwork, and anything involving accounts because she had already been helping Grandma with those things for years. Dad said he would take care of house repairs and anything physical that needed doing. Amanda had the most flexible schedule because she worked freelance event styling, so she offered to handle groceries, routine transportation, errands, companionship, and some of the appointments. I agreed to take the more important medical follow-ups where Grandma wanted someone who would listen carefully, ask questions, and keep track of medication changes. I also said I could pick up prescriptions when the pharmacy was on my way home and stop by once a week. It was a reasonable plan. That is important because nothing began with anyone announcing that Sarah would do all the work while Amanda got the credit. If it had, I would have refused before we left the room. The arrangement worked at first. Amanda brought groceries. Dad replaced a loose bathroom rail. Mom handled statements and bills. I took Grandma to an orthopedic follow-up and wrote down the surgeon's instructions because Dorothy was still taking pain medication and did not trust herself to remember every detail. Ethan and I brought dinner one Sunday. For several weeks, everyone mostly did what they said they would do. Around the beginning of March, Mom mentioned casually that Grandma was going to give Amanda a little something because keeping weekdays flexible was costing her freelance jobs. That makes sense, I said. Mom was driving. I was in the passenger seat while we were leaving Grandma's place after lunch. She's giving up paid work to be available, Mom said. Dorothy doesn't want her taking the financial hit. I looked out the window and shrugged. I don't have a problem with that. And I didn't. What Mom did not tell me was that Grandma had signed a formal caregiver agreement starting March 1st. What I understood from the conversation was that Dorothy was helping Amanda financially because Amanda's schedule had become less predictable. I did not know she was being paid $28 an hour for documented care, up to 20 hours a week. I did not know there were supposed to be monthly task logs. I did not know mileage was reimbursed separately. Those details would matter much later. At the time, Mom had described the arrangement just vaguely enough that there was nothing for me to question. The first time Amanda called me to cover something important was later that spring. Grandma had an orthopedic follow-up that had already been moved once because the doctor had been called into surgery. Amanda was supposed to drive her. At 8:15 that morning, while I was preparing for a 10 o'clock meeting, my phone rang. "Please don't be mad," Amanda said. "That's never a promising opening. I got a last-minute setup job downtown. They're paying almost double my usual day rate." "What time is Grandma's appointment?" 11:40. I looked at my calendar. "You're telling me this now?" I thought I could make both work. I can't. I closed my eyes for a second. "Did you call Mom?" "She said she has an appointment." "Dad? He's across town, so you called me last." "That's not what I meant. It's exactly what happened." Amanda went quiet. I was irritated, but the appointment mattered. Grandma had been waiting to hear whether she could reduce some of her therapy and start driving short distances again. Rescheduling could push it back weeks. I moved my 10 o'clock meeting to the afternoon, told my team I would be unavailable for a few hours, and picked Grandma up. She was sitting by the front window when I arrived, wearing a navy coat and holding her cane like she was prepared to sue somebody with it. I thought Amanda was coming. She got a job. Grandma's mouth tightened. Today? Apparently. She needs the work. That was Dorothy's first reaction. Not anger. Not accusation. She understood exactly why Amanda had gone. I remember that. Because it later made me angry when people tried to turn Grandma into a woman who had always resented Amanda. We made the appointment. The surgeon was pleased with her progress. Grandma could begin driving again eventually, but he wanted another few weeks and recommended she continue using the cane outside the house. On the way home, she insisted on buying me coffee, even though I told her she did not owe me anything. "You missed work." "I moved work." "That still counts. Then you can buy coffee." She smiled. That afternoon, Mom sent a message in the family group chat. "Great appointment today. Doctor says Mom is making excellent progress. Amanda has done such a wonderful job keeping everything moving." I stared at it longer than I should have. Amanda had called Grandma afterward. I knew that because Grandma had mentioned it. Maybe Mom meant the overall care arrangement. Maybe she was not claiming Amanda had physically taken her that day. Still, Ethan noticed my expression from the other end of the couch. "What?" I handed him my phone. He read the message. "Didn't you take her?" "Yes. Are you going to say anything?" I took the phone back. "What am I supposed to say?" "Actually, everyone, I deserve today's gold star." "You could just say you took her." "It's not worth it." Ethan watched me for a moment. "You sure?" "Yes. And at the time, I meant it. I did not need relatives congratulating me for driving my grandmother to a doctor. I knew what I had done. Grandma knew. I had a good career, a life I liked, and no interest in turning family care into a competition over who earned the most praise. What I failed to understand was that Mom was not simply giving Amanda a compliment. She was creating a record in people's minds. The cancellations remained occasional at first. Amanda did plenty of what she had agreed to do. She brought groceries. She spent afternoons with Grandma. She drove her to the hair salon and helped reorganize a kitchen cabinet so Dorothy did not have to reach above shoulder height. I saw enough of that to make Mom's praise sound believable. Then occasional slowly became a pattern. A physical therapy session overlapped with a client meeting. A pharmacy run happened on a day Amanda's car needed service. A podiatry appointment fell during a vendor setup. Most of those things were not emergencies, and I did not automatically step in. When Mom called one evening because Amanda had forgotten to bring groceries, I was standing in our kitchen making dinner with Ethan. "Can you run over there?" Mom asked. "No." There was a pause. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean I'm making dinner. Your grandmother needs groceries." "Then order them. She likes someone to bring them." "Then you bring them." "Sarah, I've already had a long day." "So have I." Mom made the small, irritated sound she used when someone forced her to acknowledge that their schedule existed independently of hers. Amanda thought she could get there, and she didn't. "So Grandma should go without?" "No. Delivery exists." Mom sighed. "You always make things so transactional." I laughed. "I'm telling you to use a grocery app, not charging you mileage." She hung up unhappy. Grandma got groceries that night. Mom ordered them. Nothing collapsed. That was exactly why I never considered myself trapped in a caregiver role. I said no when something could reasonably be handled another way. If Amanda forgot a routine errand, I did not automatically fix it. If Grandma needed an important appointment and the alternative was waiting 3 weeks, I was more likely to step in. There was a difference, and I thought everyone understood it. What changed was not how much I was willing to do. It was how the family began talking about what Amanda did. By summer, relatives were asking me how Amanda was managing with Grandma. At a barbecue, one of Dad's cousins told me, "Your sister has really stepped up." I said, "She helps a lot." That was true. The cousin smiled. "Your mom says Amanda rearranged her whole career." That was less true. I almost corrected her, then decided against it. That habit came from further back than I liked to admit. When I was 18, Amanda was 12. She had been having a terrible year at school. Nothing dramatic enough to become a family tragedy, but enough to make her miserable. A falling out with 2 close friends, some bullying that Mom took very seriously, stomachakas before school, a refusal to go to summer camp she had originally begged to attend. That same summer, I had been accepted into a 6-week university program several hours away. It was not life-changing. I did not lose a scholarship or destroy my future by staying home. But 2 days before I was supposed to leave, Amanda had a panic-filled evening after another fight with one of those girls, and Mom asked me to reconsider going. "Just for this summer," she said. "She listens to you." I remember answering, "She has you and Dad." Mom looked hurt. "It's different with a sister." Grandma had been there that night. She put her hand over mine and said, "You're the strong one, Sarah. She needs you right now." I stayed. Years later, I did not carry around resentment about that program. I went to college. I built a career I was proud of. I had opportunities my 18-year-old self could not have imagined, but the logic had survived intact. Amanda needed more. I could handle less. At 38, I no longer rearranged my life every time someone used that equation. I had learned to say no. What I had not learned was to challenge the story people told afterward when I did say yes. By the fall of 2024, Grandma was doing significantly better. She still used her cane outside, mostly because everyone harassed her if she did not, but she was driving short distances and had reclaimed enough independence to complain that we were all hovering like helicopters. The care arrangement continued because she still needed help with errands, some appointments, heavier household tasks, and days when her hip hurt enough that she preferred not to drive. Amanda was still the person Mom described as Grandma's main support. I noticed the exaggeration. I did not yet notice the structure behind it. Once, after I took Grandma to an appointment Amanda had canceled, Mom posted another group message thanking Amanda for coordinating everything. I typed a response. "Actually, I took Grandma today." Then I deleted it. Ethan saw me. "You know," he said, "correcting a fact isn't the same thing as begging for applause." "I know. Do you?" I gave him a look. He held up both hands. "Just asking." I don't want to turn Grandma into a scoreboard. That's fair. He went back to what he was doing. I remember that conversation because, in hindsight, Ethan was not asking me to compete with Amanda. He was asking whether I understood that facts could matter even when ego did not. I did not. Not yet. By the spring of 2025, wedding planning had taken over most of my free attention. Ethan and I had finalized the venue, menu, flowers, seating chart, and all the little decisions that apparently required 12 emails each. Grandma's health was stable enough that I stopped worrying about whether she would physically be able to attend. She had already chosen her dress. She had informed me she would use the cane I disliked least because, in her words, I refused to look orthopedic in the photographs. About 6 weeks before the wedding, I picked her up after a physical therapy check-in. The appointment itself was routine. We stopped for lunch, then went back to her house because she wanted help moving a small box from a high shelf in the hall closet. I was standing on a step stool when she called from the kitchen. "Sarah?" "Yes?" "Was it you who took me to Dr. Patel in March?" I stepped down. "This March?" "Yes." I walked into the kitchen. Grandma was sitting at the table with her reading glasses low on her nose. "Yeah, Amanda had that vendor meeting, remember?" She looked down at something in front of her. "And April?" I frowned. "Which appointment?" "The follow-up at the clinic." "That was me too." She did not answer. "What?" Grandma got up carefully and walked toward the small desk near the window. She opened the bottom drawer and pulled out an old blue appointment book with a cracked elastic band around it. I recognized it immediately. Grandpa used to carry it everywhere. After he died, Grandma had started using it herself because, as she once told me, throwing away a perfectly good notebook would have offended him more than death. She sat back down and opened it. The pages were covered in her handwriting. Dates, names, medication notes, small reminders in the margins. She turned back several months. I stood across from her. "Grandma, what are you looking for?" She ran one finger down a page, then the next. Her expression changed, not into panic but concentration. "March was you," she murmured. "Yes." She flipped another page. "April was you." "Yes." Another page. I leaned closer. My name appeared more often than I expected. Grandma looked up at me. "Then why do I remember paying Amanda for some of these?" I stared at Grandma across the kitchen table, still trying to decide whether I had misunderstood her. "What do you mean paying Amanda for some of these?" Grandma pushed her reading glasses higher on her nose and looked down at the blue appointment book again. "I mean, I remember Susan telling me Amanda was being paid for helping with my appointments, transportation, errands, things like that." I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Paid how?" She looked at me as though the question itself surprised her. "From the account I set aside for care." I had known Grandma was helping Amanda financially. Mom had told me that more than a year earlier, back when Amanda first started keeping more weekdays open, I had understood it as exactly that. Grandma giving Amanda some money because freelance work was unpredictable and being available cost her jobs. It had never occurred to me that there was a formal relationship attached to it. "How much are you paying her?" Grandma's forehead creased. "I don't know the exact amount this month." That answer immediately made me uncomfortable, but not for the reason Mom would later insist it should have. Grandma had never memorized every bill she paid. She had used automatic payments for utilities for years. She could tell you what property taxes roughly cost and complain for 20 minutes about her supplemental insurance premium, but if I asked her the exact electric bill from March, she would have told me to look it up myself. "What do you mean by this month?" I asked. "She submits hours." That was the moment the conversation changed. I leaned back. "Hours?" "Yes." "For what?" "For helping me." "What kind of helping?" Grandma looked increasingly annoyed, but not with me. "Driving, groceries, appointments, running errands, staying if I need someone here." I glanced down at the book. "And you pay her by the hour?" "I believe so." "You believe so?" Grandma gave me a sharp look. "Sarah, I signed the agreement over a year ago. I don't sit around reciting it every morning." "Okay." I held up one hand. "Fair." She looked back at the notebook. The old blue cover had been bent so many times that one corner curled upward. Grandpa had used that thing for everything. Oil changes, Dentist appointments. The plumber. Birthdays he pretended not to need help remembering. There was still a line in his blocky handwriting near the inside cover that said, "Call plumber kitchen tap," followed by 3 underlines as though plumbing emergencies responded to emphasis. After he died, Grandma had started using the unused pages herself. Her handwriting was smaller and neater than his. Next to medical appointments, she often wrote who took her. March 6, Patel Sarah. April 11, Clinic Sarah. April 29, Pints Review Amanda. May 8, Pharmacy Susan. It was not a forensic ledger. There were missing details. Some days had only a time and a doctor's name. But it was enough to make my question more specific. Do you see Amanda's payment records? Your mother handles the paperwork. Do you get statements? Yes. Do you look at them? Grandma hesitated. Sometimes. That answer bothered me more. Not because it proved anyone was stealing from her. It did not. But by then, Mom had spent years helping Grandma with bills, taxes, renewals, insurance forms, and account organization. Grandma trusted her. I had never thought twice about it because there had never been a reason to. Now, there was at least a reason to ask. Grandma turned another page. I thought Amanda took me to Patel in March. No. Did she arrange it? The appointment? Yes. I don't know. It was already on your calendar when you called me. Grandma nodded slowly. Then she closed the book. I may be remembering the payment part wrong. That was possible. And I refused to build a case against my mother or sister around one sentence from an 81-year-old woman trying to remember an arrangement she had signed the previous year. So I asked the simplest question. Do you want me to find out? Grandma looked at me. Yes, that mattered. I did not leave her house and start searching through accounts. I did not call Mom pretending I already knew something. Grandma had asked me to help her understand what she was paying for, so I started with the people who should have been able to answer. I called Mom from my car before I drove home. She answered on the 3rd ring. Everything okay with Dorothy? Yes. I almost smiled at the fact that she asked that before hello. It was one of the things that made what came later so difficult to flatten into a story about a mother who had never cared. Susan cared. She was simply very good at deciding what caring should look like for everyone else. I have a question about Amanda's arrangement with Grandma. There was a short pause. What arrangement? The one where Grandma pays her for caregiving. Another pause. Then Mom said, "What about it?" That confirmed more than I expected. So she is being paid as a caregiver. Of course she is. Of course? I told you that a long time ago. No. You told me Grandma was helping Amanda because she was keeping her schedule open. That's what I meant. I rested my head against the seat. That is not the same thing as being paid by the hour for specific work. You're splitting hairs. I'm asking a pretty straightforward question. Mum sighed. I knew that sigh. It meant she had already decided the conversation was becoming unnecessarily difficult and I was the person making it that way. Amanda has been doing a tremendous amount for Dorothy for more than a year. Grandma wanted to compensate her. It's all perfectly normal. I didn't say it wasn't normal. Then why are you interrogating me? I'm not. Grandma asked me about it. Mom went quiet. What did she ask? That was the first response that felt wrong. Not how is she feeling. Not what is she worried about. What did she ask? She was looking at her appointment book. She asked whether Amanda took her to a few appointments. And? I did. That doesn't mean Amanda didn't help with everything around them. I didn't say it did. Sarah, this is exactly why I didn't want to make a big thing about the money with you. I sat up straighter. What does that mean? You don't want to be paid for helping family. Fine. Amanda's situation is different. Again, Mom answered a question I had not asked. I don't care whether Amanda is being paid. Then what is the problem? I want to know what Grandma thinks she's paying her for. That sounds like the same thing. No, it doesn't. Mom exhaled. You've always had a good salary. Amanda doesn't. Her work comes and goes. If Dorothy compensates her for keeping time available and helping with things, why does that bother you? It doesn't bother me. I slowed myself down. What bothers me is that Grandma is asking why she remembers paying Amanda for appointments I took her to. You know, Dorothy gets things mixed up. There it was. Not dementia. Not incapacity. Not yet. Just a familiar phrase. Gets things mixed up. I looked through the windshield at the parking lot. What things? She called me last Tuesday, convinced her prescription pickup was Wednesday. That happens. She asked me twice what day your rehearsal dinner is. The wedding is 6 weeks away. She forgot where she put her checkbook in February. Mom, I forget where I put my phone while I'm holding it. That's not the same. Then what are you saying? I'm saying she's 81, and her memory isn't what it was. That was difficult to argue with because it was true. Grandma did repeat herself occasionally. She had once called me to confirm an appointment we had already confirmed the day before. A month earlier, she had put a bottle of vitamins in the cabinet where she kept coffee mugs and spent 20 minutes looking for it. I had seen those things. That was what made Mom's explanation effective. It was not fabricated. It was widened. I'm not accusing anyone, I said. You're acting like you are. I'm asking questions because Grandma asked me to. And I'm telling you the arrangement is fine. Then there should be no problem showing her what she's paying for. Silence. Then Mom said, I'm driving. I'm not doing this over the phone. You answered, I have to go. She disconnected. I stared at my screen for a few seconds. I still did not think I had discovered a scam. What I thought was that my mother was being defensive about something that should have been boring. That was enough to make me verify what I could independently. When Grandma came home from rehab the previous year, she had added me as an authorized proxy on her patient portal because she wanted help tracking follow-up appointments and discharge instructions. I rarely used it unless she asked me to confirm a time, but I still had access because she had never revoked it. That evening, I called her. I want to check 3 months of appointments against the book. Is that okay? Yes. Just dates. I'm not going through anything else. Sarah, I know what I gave you access to. Okay. And stop talking to me like I'm going to break. I smiled. Also okay. I opened my laptop at the dining table. Ethan was in the kitchen making tea, watching me with the expression he used when he knew I was about to turn something into a project. I recognize that face, he said. What face? The one you use before somebody's spreadsheet ruins their week. I don't have a spreadsheet. Yet. I'm checking dates. He set a mug beside me. About Grandma? Yes. He pulled out the chair next to mine. I showed him the March appointment. The portal listed the orthopedic follow-up. My work calendar showed I had blocked 11 to 2 that day. The family group chat still had Amanda's message from that morning. Running late on a client job. Sarah, can you take Grandma? I had replied, yes, I'll get her. 2 hours later, Mom had posted, so glad everything went well. Amanda has done such a wonderful job keeping Mom's care on track. I stared at the thread. Ethan read over my shoulder. That's the appointment you were talking about? Yes. Okay. Don't say okay like that. Like what? Like you already think something happened. I think you drove your grandmother. That part is not in dispute. He nodded. So what are you trying to figure out? Whether Grandma paid Amanda for it? Can you see that? No. Then this only proves you went. Exactly. That was why I married him. He was capable of agreeing with me without turning agreement into certainty. I checked April. Another follow-up. I had taken Grandma after Amanda canceled the day before because of a vendor installation. My calendar showed the block. The portal confirmed the appointment. The family chat confirmed the cancellation. Grandma's blue book said Sarah. Then I checked a third appointment. That one belonged to Amanda. She had driven Grandma, waited with her, and brought her home. I wrote it down. Ethan noticed. You're including the one Amanda did? Of course. He smiled slightly. That was not sarcasm. I know. I wanted the answer, not a verdict. By 11 that night, I had checked only 3 months. I found several important appointments I had covered, some Amanda had handled, and routine errands I could not verify from my own records because I had not been there. What I could prove was narrower than what Mom's family narrative suggested. What I could not prove was how Amanda had been paid. The next person I called was Amanda. I waited until the following afternoon because I did not want her hearing the question while Mom was sitting beside her. She answered cheerfully, Hey, bride. Do you have 5 minutes? That tone says this isn't flowers. It isn't. Okay. I stood near the window in my office. Grandma told me she pays you for caregiving. Silence. Then Amanda said, "Yeah." No denial. No panic. "How does it work?" "What do you mean? Hourly? Monthly? Flat amount?" "Hourly." That surprised me. "How much?" "Why?" "Because Grandma asked me to help her understand what she's paying for." Amanda's tone changed. "Did Mom put you up to this?" "No." "Then why is Grandma suddenly asking?" She was looking through her appointment book. "Oh, how much?" 28. "An hour?" "Yes." "How many hours?" "It depends." "Amanda." "Up to 20 a week. I don't always do 20. That was more formal than Mom had made it sound. "What do you submit?" "Stuff I do for her." That is not an answer. Transportation. Groceries. Appointments. Helping at the house. Sitting with her. Pharmacy. Whatever. "Do you log the hours?" "Mom handles the paperwork." Again. "Mom handles it." "What does that mean?" "I send her my stuff." "What stuff?" "Hours." "I don't know, Sarah." "Notes?" "Texts sometimes." "And she turns it into the monthly paperwork?" "I guess." "You guess?" "She's the one with the forms." I rubbed my forehead. "Did you log the Patel appointment in March?" "What?" "The orthopedic appointment." March 6th. Amanda was quiet long enough that I knew she was searching her memory. "I don't know. You canceled that morning." "Okay. I took Grandma. I know you've taken her to appointments." "That is not what I asked." Amanda's voice hardened. "Why are you doing this?" "Because Grandma asked me why she remembers paying you for things I did." "So this is about money?" "No." "It sounds like it. If Grandma paid you for work you actually did, I don't care." "That's easy for you to say." I closed my eyes. "What is?" "You make over $100,000 a year." "I don't." There it was again. The same arithmetic. I had more, therefore facts mattered less. "This is not about whether I want your money." "Then stop acting like I stole it from you." "I have not accused you of stealing anything." "You're checking dates." "Yes." "That's insane," Grandma asked. Grandma forgets things. The fact that both Mom and Amanda reached for the same explanation did not prove they were wrong. But it made me listen more carefully. "She remembered who drove her," I said. "Sometimes." "What does that mean?" "It means she gets mixed up." "What exactly has she mixed up about you?" "I don't keep a list." "Then maybe don't diagnose her because she asked a question you don't like." Amanda went quiet. When she spoke again, she sounded more hurt than angry. "I have helped her a lot, Sarah." "I know." "Do you?" "Yes." "That's why I'm not saying all the money is wrong." "All the money?" I heard how that sounded. Poor wording. "No, I heard you." "Amanda, I'm trying to understand the arrangement. That's it." "Then ask Mom, she has the records." I did. "And?" "She told me Grandma is confused." Amanda exhaled. "Well, what?" "She has been." I waited. Amanda did not elaborate. I lowered my voice. "If the records are clean, this becomes a 10-minute conversation." "They are." "Good." I meant it. She hung up before I did. For the next 2 days, nothing happened. I worked. Ethan and I finalized our seating chart. Grandma called to complain that our florist had apparently discovered a species of peony that cost more than her first car. I reminded her she had approved the centerpiece samples. She accused me of ruining a good complaint with evidence. That did not sound like a woman incapable of tracking reality. But I also noticed she asked me twice what time I was picking her up for a fitting the following week. Both things could be true. She could forget small details. And she could still be right about something important. On Friday evening, I stopped at Grandma's after work. She had asked me to move 2 storage boxes from the guest room because she wanted the space clear for a cousin who would be staying during the wedding weekend. When I finished, she was at her desk sorting papers. "Found something," she said. She held up a stapled packet. "What is it?" "One of the monthly care summaries." I sat beside her. The top page listed Amanda's name, the month, categories of work, and hours. It was not the actual contract. It looked like a summary Mom had printed for Grandma's records. I scanned the entries. Groceries, companionship, transportation, appointment assistance. Some of it could easily have been accurate. Then one date stopped me. March 6. Transportation and appointment assistance. Amanda. 4 hours. I stared at it. Grandma saw my expression. That's the day? Yes. You're sure? I took out my phone. The family group chat was still there. Amanda. 8, 16 A. Me. Running late on a client job. Sarah, can you take Grandma? Me. Yes, I'll get her. Mom. Later that afternoon. So glad everything went well. I opened my calendar. The blocked hours were still there. I logged into Grandma's patient portal, with her sitting beside me. March 6. Orthopedic follow-up. Subless Bardi AM. Grandma reached for the blue book. March 6. Patel Sarah. 4 independent records. None of them proved who had typed the monthly summary. None proved Amanda had seen that exact entry. None proved Mom had intentionally paid for work Amanda had not done. But they proved one thing. The paper in front of us did not match what had happened. Grandma sat very still. I looked at her. These records don't match. She read the line again. Maybe Susan put the wrong name. Maybe. Maybe this was for something else that day. Then the description is wrong too. Grandma nodded. I refused to get ahead of what we knew. One entry could be a clerical mistake. People copied dates wrong. Forms got reused. A 4-hour block might have been entered under the wrong category. I had spent enough of my career reviewing project reports to know that a bad spreadsheet did not automatically mean a conspiracy. But it did mean you checked the next row. Grandma turned the page. I stopped her. Before we go through everything, I want the actual agreement. She looked at me. You don't have it? No. I thought Susan gave everyone a copy. She didn't give me one. Grandma frowned. I signed one. I believe you. I knew what I was signing. I didn't say you didn't. Her eyes sharpened. I know that tone. What tone? The careful one everyone uses when they think I might be confused. That landed harder than I expected. I closed the packet. Then I'll stop using it. Good. What do you want to do? Grandma looked down at the March entry. I want to see what I agreed to. Okay. And I want Susan to bring me the records. I nodded. Okay. She tapped the paper once. Because if I paid Amanda for 4 hours on a day you drove me to the doctor, I want to know why. So did I. Mom did not bring Grandma the agreement the next day. She brought excuses. First, she said she was busy helping with final wedding errands. Then she said the paperwork was in a file box at home. Then she said there was no urgency because Grandma had signed it herself and already knew what was in it. By the third conversation, I stopped listening to the reasons and started noticing the pattern. Grandma noticed too. You'd think I asked her for classified documents, she said when I stopped by after work. You asked for your own agreement. That is what I find interesting. She was sitting at the kitchen table with the blue appointment book, the monthly summary, and a yellow legal pad arranged in front of her. It made me smile because she had spent most of my childhood making fun of Grandpa for turning every household problem into a desk full of paper, and now she had inherited not only his notebook but his entire method. Did she say when she'll bring it? Tomorrow. She said tomorrow yesterday. I remember. The way Grandma said it was deliberate. I understood what she was doing. Mom had started mentioning her memory often enough that Grandma had become sensitive to any suggestion she might not be tracking things correctly. That was understandable, but it also meant I had to be careful not to overreact in the opposite direction and assume every recollection she had was perfect, simply because Mom was being dismissive. Do you want me to ask Susan again? Grandma tapped the legal pad. No, I already asked. If she doesn't bring it tomorrow, I'll ask Mark. That surprised me. Dad has a copy? I think so. You think so? She gave me a look. I'm allowed to say I think when I'm not certain. I laughed. Fair. 2 days later, Mom arrived with a manila folder. She did not look happy about it. I happened to be at Grandma's because Ethan and I had an appointment with the venue later that afternoon, and Grandma had asked me to stop by first to look at a pair of shoes she was considering for the wedding. I had expected to spend 20 minutes debating heel height. Instead, Mom walked in carrying the folder like someone delivering evidence she deeply resented having to produce. There, she said, setting it on the table. Since apparently this has become an emergency. Grandma looked at the folder. I asked for a copy of something I signed. And I brought it. 2 days later. Mom exhaled. Dorothy, I have my own life. Grandma did not answer that. I pulled out the agreement. The first thing I noticed was how ordinary it looked. No dramatic legal language. No hidden clause in microscopic print. Just a straightforward family caregiver agreement with Grandma's name, Amanda's name, an effective date, and a list of services. The pay rate was $28 an hour. Maximum 20 hours per week. Monthly time and task logs required. Mileage reimbursed separately for actual miles, driven on Grandma's behalf. The services included companionship, groceries, transportation, medication pickup, home errands, and appointment assistance. I read that section twice. Then I looked at Mom. You told me Grandma was helping Amanda because she was keeping her schedule open. She was. That is not what this says. It says she's paid for helping your grandmother. It says she's paid for actual hours worked. Mom crossed her arms. Obviously. No, not obviously. You made it sound like a flexible monthly support arrangement. I didn't think you needed a legal briefing. Grandma reached for the agreement. Did I pay her if she wasn't here? Mom looked at her. What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. Amanda has done a lot for you. That wasn't my question. Mom's eyes moved to me, as if she blamed me for Grandma suddenly developing complete sentences. I did not say anything. Grandma continued. If Amanda was scheduled to take me somewhere and Sarah took me instead, did Amanda log the time? I don't know every individual day from memory. Neither do I. That's why I asked for the records. Mom's jaw tightened. This is getting ridiculous. I looked down at the agreement again. What does monthly time and task log mean in practice? Mom answered me instead of Grandma. Amanda sends me her hours and notes. I organize them. Does she fill out the final form? Sometimes I do. Who approves payment? I handle it from Dorothy's account. Grandma looked up. You handle it because I asked you to pay the bills. Not because I asked you to decide what counted as work. Mom's face changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. You did ask me to manage it. I asked you to help manage it. Same thing. No. Grandma's voice stayed calm. That is not the same thing. Mom glanced at me. This is exactly what happens when people who don't understand the whole arrangement start pulling apart individual lines. I closed the agreement. I understand $28 an hour. You understand project budgets. I understand that too. And Amanda's work isn't a corporate timesheet. The agreement literally requires a timesheet. Mom's expression hardened. You know what your problem is, Sarah. You turn everything into a system. That's not my problem with this. No. Your problem is that Amanda has something you think should be treated the way your job treats you. I stared at her. What does that even mean? She doesn't have your salary. She doesn't have your benefits. She doesn't have the security you have. Her work comes and goes. Grandma gave her something stable so she could keep helping. I'm not arguing with the rate. You're acting like you are. I'm arguing with paying her for work she didn't do. You don't know that happened. I know one summary says she did 4 hours of appointment assistance on a day I drove Grandma. 1 entry. Right. So maybe somebody made a clerical error. Then it should be easy to correct. Mom laughed once without humor. You really cannot stand not being the responsible one, can you? That landed strangely. Excuse me? You have to be the one with the calendar. The one with the answer. The one who notices every discrepancy. Amanda finally has something where she's the person Grandma depends on, and suddenly you need to audit it. The accusation was so far from what I had been thinking that for a moment I did not know how to respond. Grandma did. Don't do that. Mom looked at her. Do what? Turn my question into a fight between the girls. Mom's face softened immediately. Dorothy, that's not what I'm doing. Yes, it is. Grandma slid the agreement toward herself. I asked why I paid Amanda for something Sarah did. That is the question. Mom sat down. The shift was almost impressive. Her voice became gentler. I know, and I'm telling you there may be a simple explanation. Then show me. I will. When? After the wedding. I looked at her. The wedding is in less than 2 weeks. Exactly. You have enough going on. That has nothing to do with Grandma's records. It has everything to do with whether we blow up the family right before your wedding over one line on one sheet of paper. There it was. The argument that had saved my mother from 1,000 conversations over the years. Not now. Not before the holiday. Not before the birthday. Not before Amanda's event. Not before something important. As though timing had the power to turn a bad fact into a good one. Grandma folded her hands over the agreement. I'm not asking for a family explosion. Mom looked at her. I know. I'm asking for the logs. And I said I'll bring them. After the wedding. Yes. Grandma held her gaze. Fine. That surprised both of us. Mom's shoulders relaxed. Thank you. Grandma continued. But I want them. You'll have them. Mom stood. Then she turned to me. And you need to focus on your wedding. I smiled faintly. I can do more than one thing. That is exactly my point. She left before I could ask what that meant. Grandma waited until the front door closed before saying, She's angry at you. She should be angry at me. That would be less convenient. She gave me a tired look. Don't get smug. I'm not smug. You're getting there. She was right, and that bothered me almost as much as Mom's defensiveness. That afternoon, I did exactly what Ethan had warned me I would do. I opened a spreadsheet and began matching appointments against calendars, portal records, and family messages. By dinner, I had 3 tabs and a section labeled discrepancies. Ethan stopped behind my chair. You know Grandma asked you to help her understand this, right? That's what I'm doing. You're also starting to solve it for her. I turned toward him. The records don't match. I know. I'm not telling you to ignore that. I'm telling you there's a difference between helping Dorothy see what happened and deciding what she should do once she sees it. I disliked the distinction because I knew there was truth in it. At work, finding a problem meant organizing the evidence, identifying the cause, and moving immediately toward a solution. I was beginning to bring that same instinct into Grandma's situation. For the moment, I kept the spreadsheet, but Ethan's warning stayed with me. This was Grandma's money. And eventually, the decision about what happened next had to remain hers. 2 days later, the family sent Amanda flowers. Not all of them. My Aunt Denise and one of Dad's cousins had gone in together after Mom apparently mentioned that Amanda had been carrying so much with Grandma, while also helping with wedding week. Amanda brought the arrangement to Grandma's house because she was already headed there. I arrived 20 minutes later to drop off some printed wedding transportation information. The flowers were on the kitchen counter. Large. Expensive. A card was propped against the vase. Amanda saw me read it. What? I picked up the card. To Amanda, thank you for everything you've sacrificed this year to take care of Dorothy. We all see how much you've given up. I put it down. Did you correct them? Amanda's posture changed. About what? The part where they think you've given up your entire life. Oh my God. That's not an answer. They sent flowers. I can see that. You want me to call Aunt Denise and reject them? I want to know whether you told her the truth. What truth? That you help Grandma and also get paid for it. Amanda stared at me. Why is that relevant? Because the card says sacrifice. So paid caregivers don't sacrifice anything? That's not what I said. It's exactly what you're implying. I took a breath. No. I'm saying there's a difference between Amanda helps Grandma and Grandma compensates her, and Amanda has given up everything out of pure devotion. Nobody said pure devotion. I tapped the card. It's close. Amanda rolled her eyes. You are becoming impossible. Because I asked if you corrected an exaggeration? Because you're obsessed with making sure everyone knows exactly what you did. I almost laughed. For more than a year, I had done the opposite. That would be a very new obsession. You know what I mean? No. Explain it. She folded her arms. I do help Grandma. I know. I rearrange jobs. I turn down work. I come over here when other people don't. I know. Then why are you acting like I stole some title from you? Because Aunt Denise didn't thank you for what you actually do. She thanked you for something Mom told her you do. Amanda looked away. That was the moment I knew she understood the distinction. She simply did not like what acknowledging it would cost. Before she could answer, Grandma came into the kitchen. What are you two fighting about? Nothing, Amanda said. Flowers, I said. Grandma looked at the vase. They're very pretty. Amanda grabbed her bag. I have to go. Grandma frowned. You just got here. I have a client call. She kissed Grandma on the cheek. Then she looked at me. I'm not apologizing because people appreciate me. I didn't ask you to. She left. Grandma waited until the door closed. You were hard on her. I asked a question. You asked it like a prosecutor. That irritated me because Ethan had used almost the same language. She knows people are exaggerating what she does. Grandma looked at the card. Probably. And she lets them. Yes. So why am I the problem? I didn't say you were the problem. You said I was hard on her. You were. I pulled out a chair. What do you want me to do? Pretend it doesn't bother me? Nah. Grandma sat across from me. I want you to figure out whether you care about the flowers or the money. That shut me up. I care that the story isn't true. Then say that. I did. You also sounded angry that they thanked her. I'm not angry they thanked her. Good. Grandma's tone was mild. Because she has helped me. I know. And you have too. I know. That's why I want the records. I looked at the flowers again. Grandma was right about one thing. The emotional injustice and the financial question were starting to merge in my head. That was dangerous. If I wanted to know whether the payments were wrong, I had to separate that from whether I resented Amanda being praised. The praise might be unfair. That did not make every dollar improper. I wrote that down later. Not because Ethan told me to. Because I needed the reminder. 3 nights before our final venue walkthrough, Grandma called me. Can you come over tomorrow? Is everything okay? Yes. You sound annoyed. I am annoyed. At who? Myself. That answer worried me more than if she had said Mom. When I arrived the next afternoon, she was standing in the kitchen looking for a bottle of arthritis medication. Where did you last have it? Bathroom. We checked. Nothing. Bedroom? No. Kitchen? She gave me a look. Why would I put it in the kitchen? We found it 10 minutes later inside the pantry next to a box of tea. Grandma stared at it. I did that. Apparently. I don't remember doing that. That happens. She leaned against the counter. Your mother is going to love this. Mom doesn't need to know where you left your arthritis medication. That isn't the point. I understood. She had made a mistake. A real one. Not catastrophic. Not proof of incapacity. But real enough to give Mom another example. Grandma sat down. Sometimes I do forget things. I know. Do you think I'm confused about the payments? I hated the question because there was no comforting answer that was also honest. I think you might misremember individual details. She nodded slowly. And the March appointment? That one we can verify. So we verify. Yes. She looked relieved. Not because I had told her she remembered everything. Because I had not. That night, Mom called. Grandma had apparently mentioned the medication. This is what I've been trying to tell you, Mom said. She misplaced a bottle. She put medication in a pantry. And that isn't normal. It's not evidence she imagined me taking her to a doctor. You keep focusing on the one thing you can prove. Yes, exactly. I nearly laughed. That is generally how proof works. Sarah, I'm serious. So am I. Mom lowered her voice. Your grandmother is getting older. If you keep encouraging her to question every little thing, you're going to scare her. She asked for her own records. And now she's worried because you're making every inconsistency sound sinister. I have never called anything sinister. You don't have to. You build your spreadsheets and ask your questions and suddenly she thinks someone's stealing from her. She has never said that. Not yet. I was silent. Mom continued. Do you know how much I've done for that woman? The wording caught me. That woman? You know what I mean. No, I know you've handled her bills for years. Insurance, taxes, prescriptions, contractors, bank problems, Medicare paperwork. Every ridiculous piece of mail she doesn't understand, she brings to me. That's true. And now because Amanda got paid for helping and one date looks wrong, I'm being treated like I need an audit. No one has accused you of anything. You don't have to accuse me, you've already decided. That is not true. Then stop. No. The word came out before I had time to soften it. Mom went quiet. I continued. Grandma wants to see the logs. I'm helping her compare dates. That's it. You have a wedding in 10 days. I'm aware. Then act like it. I can plan a wedding and read a calendar. You always need to prove you can handle everything. There it was again. Why does that bother you? It doesn't. It sounds like it does. It bothers me when you use competence like a weapon. I laughed quietly. That's rich. What is that supposed to mean? It means you keep telling me Amanda needs more because I'm fine. And then you get angry when I'm competent enough to notice something doesn't add up. That is not what I'm doing. It is exactly what you're doing. Mom stopped pretending not to understand. Amanda needs the flexibility, Sarah. You have a real salary, a retirement plan, health insurance. You and Ethan just paid for most of a wedding without asking us for help. Amanda has good months and terrible months. Grandma wanted to make it easier for her to be available. That still doesn't allow her to log hours she didn't work. You have one entry. Then why are you this defensive? Because I'm tired of you acting like every family decision has to be fair down to the penny. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear. This is Grandma's money. Yes, not yours. I know that. Then whether something is fair to Amanda is not the first question. What is? Whether Grandma understood what she was paying for. Mom's voice went cold. She did. Good. Then the records will show that. She hung up. The next day, Dad called me. That alone told me Mom had talked to him. He rarely inserted himself directly into disputes between us. His preferred style was to arrive after Mom had already framed the problem, offer one sentence about everyone loving each other, then suggest we stop making things difficult. Your mother says you two had an argument. We had a conversation. She's upset. I noticed. He sighed. Sarah, can this wait until after the wedding? The full accounting. Apparently it is. Then let it go for 10 days. I'm not doing anything right now. Good. But Dad? Yes? Did you know Amanda was being paid $28 an hour? He hesitated. I knew Grandma was helping her. That isn't what I asked. I don't know the exact amount. Did you know there was a caregiver agreement? Yes. That answer surprised me, less than it should have. Did you read it? I saw it. What does that mean? Your mother sent me a copy at some point. I printed something for Grandma. So Dad had known more than I had. Did you know she was supposed to submit actual hours? I assume so. And did you know I was taking appointments when Amanda canceled? Some. There was a pause. I said, Did it ever occur to you to wonder how those two things fit together? His reply came quickly. Sarah, I'm not getting in the middle of this. I closed my eyes. You're already in it. No, Susan handles Dorothy's finances. Amanda does the caregiving. You help when you can. That description is exactly the problem. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything. I wanted to know what you knew. He sounded tired. Your mother has done a lot for Grandma. I know. And Amanda has too. I know. Then maybe stop assuming the worst. I haven't. Good. Dad? What? Not asking questions isn't the same as being neutral. He did not respond immediately. Then he said, You sound like your job. What does that mean? Like everything has to be reviewed and documented. Sometimes it does. Not family. I looked down at the notebook beside me where I had written the caregiver agreement terms. That might be the problem. We ended the call without resolving anything. The next morning, Grandma forwarded me an email. Subject line, Care Agreement Renewal. The email was from Mom to Dad from several months earlier. Mark, can you print this updated copy for Dorothy? Same rate and terms. She wants to continue Amanda's arrangement this year. Dad had replied, Got it. I'll print it tonight. Attached was the caregiver agreement. So Dad had not merely heard there was some help. He had been sent the actual terms. I did not call him back. Not yet. The wedding was close enough that every day had something attached to it. Final head count. Seating changes. Transportation confirmations. Rehearsal dinner timing. Vendor calls. Ethan and I spent one evening arranging place cards across the dining table while arguing about whether his cousin's new girlfriend belonged at the same table as his divorced aunt. For a few days, I tried to do what everyone wanted. Focus on the wedding. And for a little while, it worked. Then, Mom did something that reminded me why the problem refused to stay neatly in a folder. By then, the flower card had stopped making me angry. It had become another reminder that the family story and the financial question were not the same thing. Amanda could deserve appreciation for real care and still have been credited for work she had not done. I needed to keep those facts separate if I wanted the truth to matter more than my resentment. Later that night, Grandma called Dad and asked him to bring several boxes of family photographs and keepsakes she wanted, displayed near the guest book at the wedding. Dad dropped them off 2 days later, along with some reception materials he had volunteered to transport. One folder contained his speech. Grandma called me that evening. Her voice was different. Not frightened. Angry. "Can you come over? I'm leaving the florist now. Come here first." 25 minutes later, I walked into her living room. She was sitting in Grandpa's old chair, with several printed pages in her lap. "What happened?" She held up the pages. "Your father left this in the reception folder." I took them. At the top, Dad had typed "Father of the Bride Toast." I scanned the first page. It was mostly harmless. A story about me refusing to take training wheels off my bicycle until I had studied how the brakes worked. A line about Ethan being patient enough to survive my spreadsheets. Then I reached the middle. Amanda has shown all of us what family really means this past year. While Sarah was busy building her career and planning this beautiful wedding, Amanda put Mom first, rearranging her life around appointments, errands, and care, without ever asking for recognition. I read it twice. My chest went cold. Grandma pointed at the page. "He's going to say that at your wedding." I set the speech down. "Apparently. He makes it sound like you were too busy to help me." "I know, and like Amanda never got paid." "I know." Grandma's hand tightened around the arm of the chair. "I am not letting him say that about me." I looked at her. "Grandma, it's his toast. It's my life. He'll embarrass himself. He'll leave." I was tired. Tired of the agreement. Tired of the flowers. Tired of Mom turning questions into jealousy. Tired of Dad pretending that staying out of something meant he had no responsibility for what he repeated. But this was also my wedding. I did not want to spend it litigating who drove Grandma to which doctor. "Then let him," I said. Grandma stared at me. "What?" "Let him give the speech." "Sarah, if he wants to make Amanda sound like a saint, that's his choice." "No. Grandma, I am not blowing up my reception over this." She leaned forward. "I am not asking you to." "Then what are you asking?" She tapped the speech. "He's going to stand in front of your husband's family, your friends, your coworkers, and half our relatives and tell them something about my care that is not true." I did not answer. Her voice softened. "You think I'm angry because he's taking credit away from you, aren't you?" "Yes." That stopped me. Then she continued. "But I'm angrier because he's going to use me to do it." I looked down at the pages. Grandma said, "If Mark wants to tell everyone what family means, he can tell them what he did. He can tell them what Susan did. He can tell them what Amanda did. But he does not get to stand there and tell people who took care of me while I sit at the table pretending I didn't notice." I read the paragraph again. While Sarah was busy building her career and planning this beautiful wedding, I had taken Grandma to appointments while working that career. I had stayed overnight after a medication reaction. I had covered when something actually mattered. I had also said no when it did not. That was the truth. Not sainthood. Not sacrifice. Not neglect. Just truth. "What do you want to do?" I asked. Grandma took the speech back. "I don't know yet." That answer surprised me. "You called me over here with a plan in your voice." "I called you because I wanted you to know before Saturday." She folded the pages carefully. Then she looked at me. "But if your father stands up there and tells a room full of people that Amanda put me first while you were too busy living your life, I am not sitting quietly through it." I understood then that the next problem was no longer whether Dad's toast was unfair to me. Grandma had made it something larger. He was preparing to tell her story for her. And for the first time since the blue appointment book opened, Dorothy had decided she was done letting anyone else do that. On the morning of my wedding, Mom was the first person to make me cry. Not because she insulted me. Not because she mentioned Amanda. For once, she simply stood behind me while I sat in front of the mirror, adjusted the small clasp at the back of my dress, and went quiet. "You look beautiful," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. I turned enough to see her reflection. Susan Bennett was not a woman who cried easily in front of other people. She could deliver bad news, handle a hospital form, argue with an insurance company, and plan a family dinner for 30 without ever losing control of her face. That morning, though, her eyes were wet. For a few seconds, nothing between us felt complicated. I reached back and took her hand. "Thank you." She squeezed my fingers. "I mean it. I know." That moment mattered to me later because it would have been easier to understand everything if I could have decided my mother simply did not love me. She did. That was part of what made her choices so much harder to forgive. Love had never been the problem. The problem was what she believed love allowed her to do. The ceremony was at 5. By 4:30, the ballroom staff had finished the reception setup. The photographer was moving people through family pictures, and I had already said no to Mom twice. The first time involved Amanda. Mom appeared beside the photographer while we were organizing immediate family shots. "Can we get one with just the sisters in front?" "That's already on the list," I said. "I mean one before the parents." The photographer looked at me. I knew why. She had been told from the beginning that schedule changes came through Ethan or me. "We can do the list as planned." Mom lowered her voice. "It will take 30 seconds. And the parents are already standing here." Amanda, to her credit, said, "It's fine, Mom." Susan looked irritated. "You two barely have any pictures together." "We'll get one," I said, "just not by rearranging everything." She let it go. The second request came during cocktail hour, when Mom wanted Amanda moved to a table closer to Grandma. "Dorothy will want her nearby." Grandma chose her table. She didn't think about needing help. She's sitting with Dad's sister, 2 cousins, and one of her closest friends. Amanda knows what she needs. So do I. Mom stared at me. I smiled. No. That ended it. Those were not dramatic victories. I did not feel triumphant. They were simply normal boundaries, the kind I had learned to set years earlier. That was why I was not prepared for what happened with the cake. By then, I had begun to suspect Mom had allowed some of Amanda's caregiver logs to become inaccurate. I knew Dad had been sent the agreement. Grandma knew his toast would describe Amanda as the granddaughter who had put her first while I built my career and planned my wedding. What none of us had yet proven was how widespread the problem was, or who had knowingly allowed it. I had decided not to confront anyone at the reception. Grandma had decided only one thing. She would not sit quietly if Dad used her as evidence for a story she knew was incomplete. For most of the evening, I thought we might get through it. Dinner was good. Ethan's best man gave a speech that embarrassed him exactly the right amount. My aunt danced with Grandma for half a song, while Dorothy complained that everyone treated her cane like a fire hazard. Amanda stayed mostly with her own table. Dad carried his folded toast in the inside pocket of his jacket. Mom smiled for pictures. The cake cutting began exactly the way Ethan and I had planned it months earlier. By then, dinner was over. The first round of speeches had gone smoothly, and for the first time all evening, I felt myself relax enough to enjoy what was happening instead of mentally tracking the schedule. The photographer positioned us behind the cake table. Ethan covered my hand on the knife, and together we cut into the bottom tier while people nearby cheered. He whispered something about not dropping the slice. I told him he was the one shaking. And for a few seconds, we were laughing hard enough that I forgot about caregiver agreements, appointment logs, Dad's folded toast, and every question waiting for us after the wedding. We lifted the first slice onto a small white plate. Ethan reached for the fork. Mom moved before he could touch it. At first, I thought she was helping the photographer clear something from the table. She stepped between us so casually that there was no immediate reason to brace myself. Then she took the plate directly out of my hand, turned toward Amanda, and held it out to her. "Here, this one should be yours." Amanda blinked. That hesitation lasted maybe a second, but I noticed it because it told me something important. This had not been planned with her. Whatever Mom thought she was doing, Amanda had not walked into the cake cutting, expecting to be handed the first slice. "Mom," she said quietly, "go on." Dad lifted his champagne glass from where he was standing nearby. Just a small change in family tradition. A few people laughed. They were not laughing at me. I knew that. To anyone outside our family, the moment probably looked like a strange but affectionate gesture. One of those inside jokes guests assume makes sense because everyone involved must know the backstory. Mom had made it look harmless on purpose. A bride sharing with her sister, a father making a light joke. Nothing worth objecting to unless I wanted to become the woman who caused a scene over dessert. Amanda looked at me before taking the plate. I could have stopped her. I could have reached out and said no. I could have taken it back. I could have told Mom that the first slice belonged to Ethan and me because it was our wedding and she did not get to rewrite a tradition in the middle of it. Instead, I watched Mom. She was smiling. Not triumphantly. That would have been easier to fight. She looked pleased with herself, as though she had created a generous little moment everyone should appreciate. Then she added, loud enough for several nearby tables to hear, "She deserves something sweet after everything she's done for this family." That was when the cake stopped mattering. Everything she's done. The same phrase. The same story. Amanda as the one who sacrificed. Amanda as the one who showed up. Amanda as the person whose needs, efforts, and contributions deserved to be enlarged until they filled whatever space happened to be available. The plate in her hands was just the newest version. Ethan leaned closer to me. "Want me to take it back?" His voice was low. I looked at him, then at Amanda, then at Mom. "No." He waited. I added, "Not here." He nodded. That was all. He did not tell me I was overreacting. He did not tell me I should fight. He did not step in like I needed rescuing. He asked what I wanted, and when I answered, he respected it. Amanda was still holding the plate without eating. "Sarah," she said, "I can give it back." I looked at the slice, then at Hare. "You already have it." Mom laughed lightly. "See? Nobody's upset." I turned toward her. "I didn't say that." Her smile tightened. Only slightly. The photographer stepped in before the silence could stretch. Bride and groom, one more by the cake. Ethan moved beside me. Mom stepped out of the frame. Amanda carried the plate back toward her table. The photographer took the picture. I smiled. Later, that photograph would look almost normal. No one looking at it would know my mother had just taken the first piece of my wedding cake and handed it to my sister while praising her for a version of family sacrifice. Grandma and I had already begun to question. What bothered me most was not that Mom had taken something symbolic. It was how precisely the gesture mirrored what I was beginning to understand about the rest of the family dynamic. Something connected to me became available. Mom decided Amanda deserved it more. Then the transfer was described as generosity. I looked across the ballroom. Grandma was watching. She sat near the front with her cane resting beside her chair, her face completely still. Our eyes met. I did not know exactly what she was thinking. I would never pretend I did. But I knew she had heard Mom. She had also read Dad's toast. That mattered. Dad planned to stand in front of the room and praise Amanda as the granddaughter who had rearranged her life around Dorothy, while I had supposedly been occupied with my career and wedding. Grandma already knew that description was incomplete. Now Mom had just reinforced it publicly. A server began moving the cake table so staff could plate dessert. Guests drifted back toward their seats. Ethan and I were pulled into another round of photographs and conversations. I tried to stay present. I thanked 2 coworkers for coming. I spoke to one of Ethan's uncles. I laughed at something a bridesmaid said, even though I forgot the joke almost immediately. Then I saw Grandma stand. She did not come toward me. She walked over to Claire, our coordinator. Claire bent slightly to hear her. They spoke for less than a minute. Then Claire looked directly at me. I knew before she reached us that Grandma had asked for something. "Sarah, quick question. What's up? Your grandmother wants to speak before your father." I looked past her. Grandma stood with both hands resting on the top of her cane. "What does she want to say?" "She didn't tell me." "Did Dad ask to change the order?" "No." Claire waited. The schedule belonged to Ethan and me. Dad was supposed to speak next. Claire would not move him without our approval. I could have said no. That would have kept the reception moving exactly as planned. It also would have meant asking Grandma to sit through Dad's speech, while he described her own care in a way she believed was false. I looked at Dorothy. She met my eyes. I thought about the conversation we had before the wedding, when she had told me she would not sit quietly while Dad used her life to praise Amanda at my expense. I still did not know exactly what she intended to say, but I knew why she wanted the microphone. Let her go first. Claire nodded. Done. When she walked away, Ethan looked at me. You know what she's going to say? No. Do you want to? No. He studied my face. You okay? I'll know in about 10 minutes. That specific? Dad's toast is in about 10 minutes. He understood. We returned to the table. Amanda had eaten part of the first slice by then. That should not have mattered. It did. I noticed the fork marks in the cake and hated that I noticed them. The DJ lowered the music. Dad stood. He buttoned his jacket and pulled his folded speech from the inside pocket. The microphone waited near the dance floor. He started toward it. The spotlight stayed dark. Dad slowed. The MC lifted the microphone. Before we hear from the father of the bride, we have one small change to the order. I almost laughed. One small change. The phrase had already done enough damage that night. Dad looked toward Claire. Claire looked at me. I gave the smallest nod. The MC continued. Dorothy Bennett would like to say a few words. Mom turned sharply. Mom? Grandma was already standing. Amanda looked at me. I thought Dad was next. He was. You changed it? I approved it. Mom stared across the table. For what? I looked toward Grandma. We're about to find out. Claire adjusted the microphone for her. Dad remained a few feet away, still holding his printed toast. Grandma rested one hand on the podium and looked around the ballroom. I wasn't planning to give a speech tonight. A few people smiled. Then she looked at Dad. Before Mark tells everyone who has been taking care of me this year, I think the person being taken care of should be allowed to speak first. The room changed. Conversation stopped. Dad looked down at the pages in his hand. Mom went still. Amanda's fork lowered toward her plate. Grandma continued. She named the orthopedic appointment I had taken her to when Amanda had a work conflict. She mentioned the night a medication reaction had left her sick, and I stayed with her until morning. She named another appointment I had covered when rescheduling would have pushed it back weeks. She did not exaggerate. That was what made it effective. She did not claim Amanda had done nothing. She did not make herself helpless. She simply corrected the record. I'm grateful for every time Amanda helped me, Grandma said. She has helped me. Amanda looked up. For 1 second I saw relief. Then Grandma continued. But I won't let anyone thank her for things Sarah did. The silence that followed was different from the silence after an awkward joke. This one had weight. Mom reacted before anyone else. Mom, you're confused. Grandma turned toward her. She did not raise her voice. No, Susan. I'm old. Those are not the same thing. Mom sat back down. Dad folded his speech once more. Amanda's face reddened. The entire confrontation could have exploded there. Grandma did not let it. She moved on. She spoke about Ethan and me. She wished us patience. She teased me about checking travel details 3 times and told Ethan he had chosen a woman who would probably organize every vacation down to the minute. People laughed. The room relaxed just enough. When she finished, Claire helped her back toward the table. Dad remained beside the microphone. He looked at me. I knew what he wanted. Permission to continue. Maybe he wanted to explain. Maybe he wanted to read the harmless parts and skip the paragraph about Amanda. Maybe he wanted to smooth over what had happened. I stood. We're done with speeches. Dad frowned. Sarah. I looked toward the MC. Please move us to the next thing. Mom leaned toward me. Your father prepared that. I know. He deserves to speak. Not tonight. You can't punish him because Grandma misunderstood. I turned to her. Stop. She did. I did not shout. I did not argue. I simply refused to give the moment any more room. Music, please. The DJ brought the song up. Guests began moving again. Dad returned to the table with the toast still unread. For the next hour, I deliberately reclaimed my wedding. I danced with Ethan. I talked to our friends. I let Grandma complain about my shoes. I did not confront Amanda over the cake. I did not ask Mom why her first instinct had been to call Grandma confused. I did not turn the reception into an investigation of caregiver payments. There would be time for records later. There would be time for questions. There would be time for all the things Mom clearly did not want examined. That night still belonged to Ethan and me. But something had changed. My parents had expected the room to hear their version of who had cared for Dorothy. Instead, Dorothy had spoken for herself. And for the first time, Mom could no longer rely on everyone treating her version as the only one that mattered. Near the end of the reception, when several guests had already left, Mom found me in the corridor outside the ballroom. She was no longer performing calm. "You have no idea what you just let her start." I looked at her. "I let Grandma speak. You undermined your father. He had a speech about Grandma." Grandma disagreed. "She is getting confused. She remembered who took her to 3 appointments. That isn't the point." "Then what is?" Mom glanced toward the ballroom doors. "And now she thinks she can question every decision I've made for her." I stopped. That sentence was different. Not every story. Not every compliment. Every decision. "What decisions?" Mom's face tightened. "You don't know what you're getting involved in." "Then tell me. This is your wedding night. You brought it up." She shook her head. "I am not doing this here." She started to walk away. I caught her before she reached the ballroom doors. "Mom." She turned. "What?" Grandma asking questions is not something you get to permit. For a second, she looked genuinely shocked. Then she said, "You'll understand when this gets worse." She walked away. I stood in the corridor for another moment before Ethan found me. "You okay?" I looked toward the ballroom. Grandma was laughing at something one of my cousins had said. Amanda sat beside Dad. Mom had returned to her table. From a distance, they looked like the same family who had arrived that afternoon. They were not. Neither was I. At that point, I still thought the argument was about distorted credit, one inaccurate caregiver entry, and a mother who had become too protective of the system she had built around Grandma. What I had not understood yet was that Susan was not afraid Dorothy would remember the wrong thing. She was afraid Dorothy would start asking for the records that could prove she remembered the right ones. 2 weeks after the wedding, Mom had already started rewriting what happened. She did not tell people Grandma had stood up at my reception and corrected a story about her own care. She told them Dorothy had a bad day. She told Aunt Denise that wedding stress had overwhelmed her. She told one of Dad's cousins that Grandma had become increasingly forgetful and that I had encouraged her to speak while she was upset. I heard most of it secondhand because Mom never sent one dramatic family-wide message. That would have been too obvious. She worked one conversation at a time, which was how she had always been most effective. My cousin Laura called me on a Sunday afternoon. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything," she said. That sentence usually meant the opposite. "Okay, your mom said Grandma's been having memory issues. She forgets things sometimes." That's not how Susan described it. I stopped folding laundry. How did she describe it? She said Grandma has been getting confused about finances and appointments, and that the wedding speech was one example. I sat down on the edge of the bed. "Did she say Grandma doesn't know who took her to appointments?" "She said Grandma mixes up details." That was the danger. Mom never needed to say something completely false. Grandma had mixed up details before. She had misplaced medication, repeated a question, forgotten a date. Mom took those ordinary mistakes and stretched them until they covered anything Dorothy might disagree with. "I'm not asking you to pick a side," I said. "But if Grandma tells you something, ask her directly before assuming Mom is speaking for her." Laura was quiet. "That sounds serious." "It is serious enough that Grandma should still get to speak for herself." I did not send screenshots to the family group. I did not call Aunt Denise or start a campaign correcting every version Mom had already circulated. That would have turned the whole thing into exactly what Susan wanted. Sarah versus Susan, with Grandma reduced to the subject of the argument instead of the person whose decisions mattered. But Mom was not only talking, she was tightening control. The first sign was an appointment. I had an authorized proxy login to Grandma's patient portal because Dorothy had given me access after rehab. One Monday morning, I logged in to confirm a routine follow-up I thought was scheduled for Thursday. It was gone. I called Grandma. "Did you cancel Dr. Patel?" "No." "Did they reschedule?" "Not that I know of." I checked the portal again. The appointment had been moved to the following week. "Did Mom call you?" She said Thursday was inconvenient. For who? Grandma went quiet. Amanda. I leaned back in my chair. Did you want it moved? I said I didn't care if the doctor had another opening. That's not the same question. I know. Do you still want the new date? Yes, it's fine. I forced myself to stop there. The issue was not whether the rescheduled appointment caused harm. It did not. The issue was that Mom had started treating Grandma's schedule as something she could reorganize around Amanda, while simultaneously telling everyone Dorothy was too confused to understand what was happening. Later that week, Grandma called me. I want to talk to someone. About the records? About all of it. You want Mom there? No. That answer came fast. What do you want me to do? Find me a lawyer who works with older people and financial paperwork. I did not tell her who to hire. I found 3 elder law attorneys within a reasonable drive, sent her their websites and phone numbers, and let her choose. That distinction mattered more to me later than it did then. Grandma picked one in Oakbrook because the office was close, and the attorney had experience with financial powers of attorney and elder care agreements. I drove her. The consultation was less dramatic than I expected. No one accused Mom of fraud. No one told Grandma she had been exploited. The attorney asked Dorothy what she wanted. Grandma said, I want to know what I signed, what Susan is allowed to do, and whether I can get a full accounting. The attorney asked about the power of attorney. Grandma explained that she had signed it years earlier because Mom handled bills and paperwork better than Dad. The attorney reviewed the copy Grandma had brought. Then she asked a question that changed the tone. Has anyone challenged your ability to make your own financial decisions? Grandma looked at me, then back at her. My daughter-in-law says I'm confused. The attorney did not react. Has a doctor diagnosed you with dementia? No. Do you believe you understand your accounts, your family relationships, and the decisions you're asking me about today? Yes. Has anyone suggested Sarah is influencing you? Grandma gave a short laugh. My entire family suggests something is Sarah's fault eventually. I almost smiled. The attorney did not. She explained that if Grandma wanted to revoke or change financial authority later, and if Susan was already telling people Dorothy lacked capacity, an independent evaluation could become important. Not because forgetting a date meant Grandma could not make decisions. Because disputes became easier to manipulate when everyone relied on opinion. Grandma agreed. I did not love it. Part of me resented the idea that Dorothy had to prove she understood her own money just because Mom had begun using the word confused. But I also understood why an independent assessment was cleaner than my opinion, Mom's opinion, or Grandma's anger. The evaluation happened the following week. I was not in the room. Grandma went through it herself. Afterward, she told me the clinician had asked questions about her finances, medications, family, living situation, and what changing a financial agent would mean. There were also memory and reasoning questions. Grandma hated some of them. I knew the date, she told me. I just think it's rude to ask an 81-year-old woman to subtract sevens backward. What did you say? That I spent enough of my life doing arithmetic and I resent being tested on it now. I laughed. She did too. The written assessment was more sober. It noted age-related forgetfulness. It did not claim Grandma had perfect memory. It did not say she could never become impaired. It said that at the time of evaluation, she understood her assets, relationships, the purpose of the financial authority she had granted, and the consequences of changing it. She could make that decision. Mom did not know about the evaluation yet. I wanted to keep it that way until Grandma decided what came next. That was where I made my own mistake. Once there was something objective in front of us, I shifted into problem-solving mode too fast. I opened my laptop at Grandma's kitchen table. We should change the account contacts first. Then the pharmacy authorization. You'll want paper statements redirected, and we should probably suspend caregiver payments until we know what the logs say. Grandma looked at me. I haven't decided to suspend anything. I know, but if the records are wrong, I said I haven't decided. I stopped. She tapped the table with one finger. You are doing it too. Doing what? Deciding what comes next before I do. That's not what I'm doing. It is. I'm giving you options. You're giving me a checklist. I felt defensive immediately. Because you asked for help. I asked you to help me understand. I am helping you understand. You are trying to fix it. I closed my mouth. Grandma leaned back. Sarah, I know you mean well. I hated that sentence. People only said it right before telling you that your good intentions had become a problem. She continued. Your mother has spent years deciding what is easiest for me. I don't want to trade that for you deciding what is safest for me. That hit exactly where Ethan's warning had hit, only harder. I looked down at the list. Account contacts, statements, caregiver payments, pharmacy authorization. Every line was reasonable. That did not mean it was mine to choose. I closed the laptop. Okay. Grandma studied me. Are you angry? A little. At me? At myself. That's allowed. I nodded. What do you want to do next? She looked satisfied. That is a better question. Her answer was simple. I want the accounting. So we went back to the attorney. Grandma instructed her to send a formal written request for records connected to the caregiver agreement and the use of her care account. The request covered the monthly time and task logs, caregiver payments, mileage reimbursements, relevant account statements, and supporting records for selected care expenses. The attorney explained that asking for records was not the same as accusing anyone of wrongdoing. It was simply an accounting, what money had gone out, for what purpose, and based on what documentation. Grandma signed the request, and I drove her home afterward. Neither of us treated it like a victory because, at that point, we still did not know what the records would show. That evening, Mom called me. Not Grandma. Me. What exactly did she ask to see? I was standing in the kitchen while Ethan rinsed dishes. I'm not the person who sent the request. Don't do that. Do what? Pretend you don't know what's going on. I know she asked for an accounting. Of what? Her money. Mom's voice hardened. I want to know what documents. Then ask Grandma. She's not answering me. That sounds like an answer. Sarah? I leaned against the counter. What are you worried she'll find? There was a pause. Too long. Then Mom said, I'm worried you're frightening an old woman into thinking her own family stole from her. I have never told her anyone stole anything. You don't have to say the word. Then what exactly have I done? You showed her spreadsheets. She had already found a paid entry that didn't match an appointment. One entry. So why are you this scared of the rest? I'm not scared. Then send the records. I don't take orders from you. They aren't my orders. That silenced her for a second. I continued. They're Grandma's. Mom lowered her voice. You have no idea how complicated this is. Then the accounting should help. This is what I mean. You think everything becomes simple because someone prints it on paper. No. I think paper makes it harder to pretend two different things happened on the same day. She hung up. Ethan turned off the faucet. That sounded productive. Very. What did she want? To know exactly what Grandma requested. He handed me a towel. And? She sounded more worried about the list than about Grandma. Ethan did not answer immediately. Then he said, maybe because the list is something she can't control. That night, Grandma texted me one line. Susan called 3 times. I did not answer. I stared at the message. A month earlier, Mom had been telling everyone Dorothy could not reliably remember appointments. Now she was urgently trying to find out which financial records Dorothy had asked to see. For the first time, I stopped wondering whether Susan believed Grandma was confused. I started wondering what Mom needed everyone else to believe before the records arrived. The records arrived in pieces. That was the first thing I learned about an accounting. I had imagined one clean packet that would either confirm our concerns or make me feel foolish for ever having them. Instead, Grandma's attorney received PDFs, scanned forms, bank statements, mileage sheets, and monthly caregiver summaries in separate batches over nearly 2 weeks. Some were complete. Some referenced attachments that were not included. Some had handwritten notes in margins. Nothing looked dramatic enough to justify the way Mom had reacted when Grandma asked to see it. That made the inconsistencies worse, not better. The first afternoon we reviewed anything, Grandma's attorney reminded both of us of the same thing. Do not assume every error is intentional. I nodded. Grandma said, I wasn't planning to. The attorney looked at me. I was. Grandma turned her head. Isaihu. Internally. The attorney almost smiled. We started with 3 months. Not because those were the only months that mattered, but because I had learned enough by then to know that looking at 15 months all at once would turn the story into numbers. I wanted to understand what the numbers represented. March, April, May. 3 months close enough to Grandma's appointment book that we had multiple independent records. Amanda had been paid regularly during all 3. The total wages were not shocking. At $28 an hour, even 10 or 15 hours a week added up quickly. Over more than a year, her caregiver compensation had crossed $30,000. That number would have sounded enormous if I had forgotten that real care cost real money. Amanda had done real work. That remained true. The question was how much of what she had been paid for matched what she had actually done. We began with March. Mom's monthly summary listed categories instead of long descriptions. Under Amanda's name, there were blocks for companionship, errands, groceries, transportation, medication pickup, and appointment assistance. Some entries immediately made sense. March 2, groceries and companionship. Grandma remembered Amanda coming over that afternoon. Her blue book said Amanda. A receipt from the grocery store matched. New problem. March 4, pharmacy pickup. Grandma thought Amanda had done that one too. There was no reason to dispute it. Then March 6, 4 hours. Transportation and appointment assistance. Amanda. I did not need to search my memory. We already had the records. The family group chat showed Amanda canceling that morning, running late on a client job. Sarah, can you take Grandma? My response was underneath. Yes, I'll get her. My work calendar showed the 3-hour block I had cleared. Grandma's patient portal showed the orthopedic appointment. Her blue appointment book said Sarah. The mileage sheet made it worse. Amanda had been reimbursed for a round trip between Grandma's house and the clinic. I stared at the form. This isn't just a category error. Grandma leaned closer. The route was listed. Grandma's address. Clinic address. Mileage. Date. March 6. I looked at the attorney. She didn't drive that. Do you know whether Amanda submitted this directly? No. That matters. Grandma nodded. Susan handled the forms. I turned the page. The attorney stopped me. One thing at a time. I looked at her. She pointed at the mileage line. This proves the reimbursement record says Amanda drove that trip. Yes. It does not yet prove who entered it or what Amanda knew. I hated how often responsible people had started saying versions of that sentence to me. Not because they were wrong, because uncertainty had become exhausting. I wanted facts to do more than facts were sometimes capable of doing. Grandma looked at me. You're making the face. What face? The one Ethan warned me about. You and Ethan talk too much. He likes me. I know. We moved on. April contained a different mix. Amanda had several legitimate entries. A grocery run, 2 afternoons of companionship, 1 salon trip, 1 pharmacy pickup. Then an appointment Sarah appeared in on every independent record we had. But Amanda's summary included 3 hours of care coordination and transport. That phrase bothered me because it was vaguer than the March entry. Could she have coordinated something around the appointment? I asked. Grandma shrugged. She might have called, the attorney said. Then that one requires clarification. It isn't necessarily unsupported. I marked it differently. Not false. Questionable. That distinction became important. By the end of the first hour, the story was not clean enough for outrage. Amanda had done enough legitimate work that anyone trying to describe the entire arrangement as fake would have been lying. But the records were not clean enough for dismissal either. There were multiple entries where the person being paid and the person who had actually done the obvious task did not match. There were mileage reimbursements tied to routes Amanda had not driven. There were task descriptions broad enough that they could hide either sloppy bookkeeping or intentional padding. I had spent most of my career reviewing vendors, schedules, cost forecasts, and project reports. The basic rule was the same whether you were talking about a multi-million-dollar contract or your grandmother's caregiver logs. If one number did not reconcile, you checked the surrounding numbers. If several did not reconcile, you stopped calling them isolated. May was the month that changed my tone. There was an entry for 6 hours of caregiving on a Saturday. Grandma had spent that Saturday at my house. I remembered because Ethan had grilled burgers, and Grandma had criticized his seasoning in a way he still brought up. I checked my phone. There were pictures. Time-stamped. Grandma sitting on our patio. Me beside her. Ethan at the grill. Amanda's log still showed 6 hours. The attorney leaned back. Was Amanda with you? No. Did she perform another caregiver task that day? Not that I know of. Grandma shook her head. I was with Sarah from before lunch until after dinner. I looked at the bank statement. Amanda had been paid. Again, that did not prove she personally fabricated the entry, but it proved the system had paid for hours that did not match reality. Then we found the second mileage reimbursement. Another clinic trip. Another day Amanda had canceled. Another route she had not driven. This one was impossible to explain, as a typo involving the wrong category. Someone had submitted the route. Someone had attached miles to it. Someone had approved reimbursement. He sat back. How many of these do we need before this stops being sloppy? The attorney answered carefully. For financial recovery, what matters is the pattern, the supporting records, the terms of the agreement, and who authorized what. Intent matters differently depending on what remedy Dorothy wants. Grandma looked at her. I want my money back if I paid for work that wasn't done. That is a clear goal. I do not want Amanda punished for work she did do. That is also clear. Grandma looked at me. I nodded. That was exactly the line I wanted too. The next category was harder. 2 transfers had been labeled care availability advances. The amounts were larger than Amanda's usual weekly caregiver payment. One happened 3 days before the first of the month. The other happened shortly before a car payment Amanda had complained about in the family group. My instinct was immediate. Rent. Car. Grandma saw my expression. Don't. I didn't say anything. You were about to. The attorney looked between us. Do you remember authorizing advances? Grandma frowned. I remember Susan saying Amanda was struggling after losing some work. Did Susan ask permission to help her financially? Yes. Did she say the money would come from your care account? I don't remember. Did she say it would be recorded as caregiver compensation or care expense? Grandma shook her head. No. I pointed to the description. Care availability advance. The attorney said, the label is significant, but the timing alone does not prove misuse. I knew that. I also knew if I said it aloud, I would sound exactly like the person everyone thought I was becoming. So I wrote a note instead. Need authorization context. That was all. By the end of the second review session, we had a working pattern. Some caregiver hours were well supported. Some were ambiguous. Some appeared unsupported. Some mileage claims contradicted independent records. Some advances required an explanation of what Grandma had actually authorized. No single page contained the whole story. That mattered because I had spent the weeks before the accounting waiting for the one document that would make everything simple. There was no one document. There was only accumulation. On the drive home, Grandma was quieter than usual. I assumed she was tired until she said, I should have checked. I glanced at her. You trusted, Mom. That is not an answer. It's part of one. I signed the agreement. Yes. I told Susan she could handle the paperwork. Yes. I let her show me summaries instead of asking to see the logs. You were recovering from surgery. For some of it. That still matters. Grandma looked out the window. I am not asking you to excuse me. I kept driving. What do you want me to say? The truth. I thought about that. You should have looked more closely. She nodded. Thank you. But trusting your daughter-in-law to manage paperwork does not mean you agreed to pay for hours nobody worked. I know. And if Amanda did legitimate care, she deserved legitimate pay. I know that too. She was quiet again. Then she said, I thought I was doing something fair. For Amanda. For everyone. I waited. When your mother told me Amanda was turning down jobs to help me, I believed her. When she said you had your work and Ethan and the wedding, I believed that too. That was true. Yes. But? Grandma looked at me. But somewhere along the way, Sarah has a stable life. Became, Sarah can absorb more. The sentence hit me harder than anything in the accounting. Because it was not about a mileage form. It was not even about Amanda. It was the family equation in its cleanest form. Amanda needed something. I could survive without it. So the difference became reasonable. Grandma folded her hands over the top of her cane. When your mother called Amanda sensitive and you strong, I thought she was complimenting both of you. I kept my eyes on the road. I know. I said it too. I did not answer. I called you the strong one. Yes. I was proud of you. I know. I did not understand what we were doing with that. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. What were you doing? Grandma looked out the passenger window, giving ourselves permission to ask more from you. I swallowed. There were a lot of things I could have said. That I had turned out fine. That I had built the career anyway. That staying home at 18 had not ruined me. That I had chosen many of the times I helped her. All of those things were true. None answered what she had said. I did need things, I said finally. I just learned not to ask. Grandma nodded. I know that now. The traffic slowed near an interchange. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Then Grandma said, I'm sorry. The words hurt more than I expected. Not because I had been waiting my whole life to hear them. I hadn't. I had not organized my adult identity around being wronged by my family. I had a life I liked, but there was something painful about having an older person finally name a pattern you had spent years telling yourself was too small to matter. I reached over at the next red light and squeezed her hand. I don't want this turning into everyone deciding Amanda never did anything. It won't. She did help you. I know. And I don't want people pretending every payment was stolen. Grandma gave me a sharp look. Neither do I. Good. You're not the only one who can be fair, Sarah. I laughed, despite myself. That sounded competitive. Maybe it is. The light changed. We drove the rest of the way home without talking about money. The next batch of records arrived 4 days later. I reviewed them with the attorney and Grandma. They strengthened the same pattern but did not answer the question that had started to bother me most. Who knew the logs were wrong? That distinction mattered. If Amanda sent honest notes and Mom altered them, that was one story. If Amanda inflated hours and Mom approved them, that was another. If both treated the whole system casually because Grandma had broadly agreed to help Amanda, that was different again. The documents could show money moved. They could show tasks did not match. They could show mileage claims were impossible. They could not show intent. At the end of the meeting, the attorney closed the folder. The records establish enough discrepancies that Dorothy has a legitimate reason to request explanations and potentially seek reimbursement. Grandma nodded. But? The attorney looked at her. But the paperwork alone does not tell us what Amanda believed Susan was authorized to do, what Susan told Amanda, or how those entries were created. I knew what that meant. We have to ask Amanda. If Dorothy wants clarity, yes. Grandma looked at me. You should talk to her first. Why me? Because she'll hear accusation from me now, even if I don't mean it that way. She hears accusation from me too. Probably. That is comforting. Grandma smiled slightly. You're her sister. I looked at the folder. The accounting had proven something was wrong. It had not yet proven who understood how wrong it was. And for the first time since the wedding, I realized the next answer was not sitting in a bank statement. It was sitting with Amanda. Amanda agreed to meet me at a coffee shop halfway between her apartment and mine. I chose a public place on purpose, not because I thought she would make a scene, but because I did not want Mom wandering into the conversation halfway through. I also did not want Grandma there. The accounting involved Dorothy's money, but before anyone decided what to do legally, I wanted to understand what Amanda thought had been happening. I arrived first and took a table near the back. I brought exactly 3 things. A copy of the March caregiver summary, the mileage reimbursement for the clinic trip I had driven, and screenshots from the family group chat showing Amanda canceling that morning and asking me to take Grandma. I did not bring the entire accounting file. I did not bring bank statements. I did not bring the agreement, because Amanda already knew the terms better than I had. When she walked in, she saw the folder in front of me and stopped. Seriously? Sit down. That looks like an ambush. It's 3 pages. She pulled out the chair. That's still more paperwork than I wanted with coffee. Amanda looked tired. Not guilty. Not scared. Just tired. For a moment, I remembered all the versions of her I had known before this. Amanda at 12, sitting on my bed crying because 2 girls at school had stopped speaking to her. Amanda at 21, calling me because she had no idea how to negotiate her first freelance contract. Amanda at 28, laughing so hard at Thanksgiving that she spilled wine on Dad's carpet and spent the next hour trying to hide the stain under a chair. She was my sister before she became a line item. That did not make the questions disappear. It made them harder. I slid the March summary toward her. Look at the 6th. She read it. Her expression changed. What? That's the Patel appointment. I know what Patel is. You canceled that morning. She looked at the next page. The group chat. Then the mileage form. Her forehead tightened. I didn't drive that. I know. I didn't claim mileage for that. That's what I'm trying to understand. She pushed the paper back. Mom does the forms? You send her your hours. Yes. What did you send for March 6th? I don't remember. Did you tell her you worked 4 hours? I said I don't remember. Amanda, what do you want me to say? That I have a perfect memory of a text I sent 5 months ago? No. I kept my voice level. I want you to look at the record and tell me whether it matches what happened. No. Good. She stared at me. You're enjoying this. I nearly laughed. No. You've been waiting to prove Mom wrong. That is not what this meeting is about. It's exactly what it's about. I pointed to the mileage form. You didn't drive Grandma that day. I know. You were reimbursed for driving her. I didn't create that form. I know. Then why am I sitting here like I forged something? Because Grandma's account paid it. Amanda leaned back. So ask Mom. We are. Then why are you asking me? Because your name is on the work. Her jaw tightened. I could feel the conversation slipping toward the fight we had, both had 100 times in different forms. Me asking for specifics. Amanda hearing judgment. Amanda defending the feeling behind something instead of the fact. Me getting sharper because she would not answer. That pattern had never produced much except louder voices. So I stopped. I'm not asking whether you're a bad person. Amanda said nothing. I'm asking what you thought Mom was doing. I thought she was paying me for taking care of Grandma. Did you think she was paying you for days I went instead? No. That answer came immediately. Did you know she was submitting those days? No. Did you know about the mileage? No. Did you ever see the final monthly logs? Sometimes. Sometimes. If Mom sent me something to check. How often? I don't know. Not every month. That sounded possible. It also sounded incomplete. What did you normally send her? Texts. What kind? My hours. Stuff I did. Like what? 3 hours Tuesday, groceries and Grandma. 2 hours Thursday, pharmacy. Whatever. Did you ever send her hours for days you canceled? Amanda looked offended. No. Did Mom ever tell you she was including time because you had held the day open? She said Grandma wanted me compensated for keeping flexibility. That sentence brought us back to the beginning. But the agreement is hourly. I know. Actual care. I know that too. Then what did keeping flexibility mean? I don't know, Sarah. You keep saying that. Because I didn't run Grandma's accounting. I watched her. There was enough frustration in her face that I believed part of what she was saying. At least I believed she had not been sitting at home inventing routes to clinics she never drove. That did not answer how much she knew about the system around her. Amanda folded her arms. Mom told me Grandma approved all of it. All of what? The pay. The extra help. Everything. What exactly did Mom say Grandma approved? She said Grandma wanted me stable enough that I could keep helping. That is not the same as approving false hours. I never said it was. Then show me. Amanda stared. Show you what? The messages where Mom said Grandma approved it. Her face changed. You want to read my texts? You just told me Mom explained everything. She did. Then show me. For several seconds, neither of us moved. I expected her to refuse. Instead, Amanda picked up her phone. Fine. She unlocked it and opened her thread with Mom. Here. She kept the phone in her own hand at first. Then she turned it toward me. There were hundreds of messages. Most were ordinary. Pictures. Family plans. Mom asking whether Amanda had eaten. Amanda asking if Dad still had her folding table. I did not scroll randomly. Search Grandma. Amanda did. The results were extensive. She looked annoyed. Obviously, we talk about her a lot. Search March 6th. That's not how texts work. Search Patel. No result. Try Sarah. Amanda gave me a look. That could be dangerous. Do it. She searched my name. The first few hits had nothing to do with caregiving. Wedding invitations. A Christmas gift. Mom complaining that I had refused to change a restaurant reservation. Then Amanda's thumb stopped. She read something. I saw her face change before she showed me the screen. The message was from earlier that spring. Amanda, I can't make Thursday. That vendor moved setup again. Mom, Sarah will go. Amanda, did she say she could? Mom, she will. I looked at Amanda. She swallowed. That's not the one you were asking about. No. She scrolled down. A few lines later. Mom, don't bring up the monthly amount with Sarah. She'll turn it into an argument. Amanda, why would I bring it up? Mom, exactly. I read it twice. Amanda pulled the phone slightly closer to herself. That sounds bad. It sounds deliberate. She knew you'd make this complicated. She knew I didn't know. Amanda did not answer. That difference mattered. Mom had not simply failed to mention Amanda's compensation. She had specifically told Amanda not to tell me the amount. I leaned back. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't think it was your business. That's fair. Amanda looked surprised. I continued. Grandma's arrangement with you was not automatically my business. Exactly. But Mom was also using me as backup while telling you not to mention how the payment worked. I didn't know she was putting your appointments on my logs. I believe that you didn't know every entry. That's not the same as believing me. It is exactly what I said. She looked back at the phone. Keep going, I said. Why? Because you said Mom told you Grandma approved everything. She did. Show me that. Amanda searched a few more terms. Pay. Grandma. Rent. Stable. She found a conversation from several months earlier. I watched her read it silently. Then she turned the screen toward me. Amanda. Is Grandma really okay paying this much? Mom. Yes. Amanda. It's more than I expected this month. Mom. She wants you stable. Don't overthink it. Amanda. I just don't want her thinking I'm taking advantage. Mom. You are helping her. Let me handle the rest. I felt something settle in my chest. Not relief. Not victory. Clarity. Amanda had wondered. That was the part I had not known. She had looked at the amount and thought it might be too much. She had asked. Then Mom gave her the answer she wanted. Do not overthink it. Let me handle the rest. Amanda took the phone back. See? Mom told me. I see that. She said Grandma approved. She said Grandma wanted you stable. Same thing. No. Amanda gave an irritated laugh. Here we go. That is not the same thing. You're splitting words because you want it to sound worse. No. Grandma approved this specific payment is one statement. Grandma wants you stable is another. Mom handled her finances. That doesn't make them the same. Amanda rubbed her forehead. I asked. Yes. I literally asked if Grandma was okay paying that much. Yes. And Mom said yes. She told you not to overthink it. What was I supposed to do? Demand a notarized statement every month? No. Then what? Ask Grandma. Amanda stopped. That was the simplest thing in the room, and the one thing she had not done. I didn't want to make Grandma feel like I was questioning her. You were already questioning it. To Mom. Because Mom was the person giving you the answer you wanted. Her face hardened. That is unfair. Is it? Yes. Then why didn't you ask Grandma? Amanda looked away. I waited. She picked up her coffee. It had gone cold. I don't know. That was the first time she said it, and I believed it meant something more than avoidance. Maybe she truly did not know then. Maybe she knew now. I pointed at the phone. Will you send me those messages? Her head snapped back. No. You just used them to explain what Mom told you. That doesn't mean I'm handing over my private texts. Grandma's attorney needs context. No. Then show them to Grandma. I said no. I did not push immediately. Amanda, if your position is that Mom told you everything was authorized, those messages support you. They also make Mom look terrible. That is not a reason they stop being true. She shook her head. You don't understand. I understand exactly what they say. No, you understand documents. That irritated me. Don't do that. Do what? Turn facts into one of my personality flaws because you don't like where they lead. I'm telling you, Mom was trying to help. Help who? Me. There was no hesitation. That answer mattered. I sat back. Amanda looked at the messages again. Then she sighed. I'll send the ones we looked at. I did not hide my surprise. All of them? The ones about Grandma's approval and the amount. And the one where Mom says I'll cover? Her jaw tightened. That too. And the one telling you not to mention the monthly amount? Amanda looked like she regretted the entire meeting. Fine. She selected the messages and sent screenshots to me. I did not scroll beyond what she had shown me. I did not ask for her phone. I checked that the screenshots had arrived, then put my phone face down. Thank you. Don't make me regret it. That depends on what you mean. I mean, don't send this to the whole family. I'm not going to. Don't use it to humiliate Mom. I'm giving it to Grandma and her attorney. Amanda's shoulders dropped. She's going to lose it. Mom? Yes. That isn't my decision. It will feel like yours. Feeling like something is not the same as being true. Amanda stared at me. You really have turned into a lawyer. No. A lawyer would be charging you. She almost smiled. That tiny crack in the tension made what happened next harder. Amanda looked down at the March summary again. Fine, we fix it. I waited. We go through the logs, she said. Anything Mom put in wrong, we correct. That's a start. I can stop using her for the paperwork. That would probably be wise. I'll do my own logs. That doesn't solve the old ones. Her expression shifted. Why not? Because Grandma already paid them. So? So if she paid for unsupported hours or mileage, that has to be reviewed. Amanda looked at me as though I had suddenly changed the rules. We can fix it going forward. And the past? She rubbed her lips together. Does Grandma really need to go back through all the old months? Yes. Why? I almost laughed. Because they're her accounts. Sarah. What? If we know some entries were wrong and we fix the system now, why drag everyone through every month? Because we don't know how many entries were wrong. We know I did work. I know. A lot of work. I know. So this isn't like I did nothing and got $30,000. I've never said that. Then why are you acting like every dollar needs to be dissected? Because some of those dollars came from hours or mileage you did not earn. Her face flushed. You make it sound disgusting. I'm describing it. No, you're judging me. I'm asking whether Grandma paid for work she received. Amanda leaned forward. And what if she did pay me too much? Then she decides what she wants done. Amanda's eyes moved away. I saw something change. Not shame exactly. Fear. Because I already spent it. There it was. The sentence was quiet. Almost embarrassed. That made it worse than if she had shouted. I looked at her. How much? I don't know. How do you not know? Because I didn't separate it. It paid rent. My car, groceries, credit cards, life. I nodded slowly. So now the past shouldn't matter because the money is gone. That is not what I said. It's what you're asking. I'm asking for some perspective. Whose? Everyone's. No. You're asking Grandma to absorb the difference because paying it back would hurt you. Amanda's eyes filled. I hated seeing it. I hated that some part of me still wanted to reach across the table and make the conversation gentler. But being gentler could not mean pretending the central fact had changed. She wiped one eye angrily. You've never understood what it's like to have months where you don't know what you'll make. That's true. You and Ethan have salaries. Yes. You have health insurance. Retirement accounts. Savings. Yes. You think that makes everything simple. No. Mom was helping me stay afloat. With Grandma's money. Grandma wanted to help me. Maybe she did. Then what are we fighting about? Whether she knew what she was paying for. Amanda looked down. I lowered my voice. If Grandma knowingly decided to give you $10,000 because she loved you and wanted you stable, I would have nothing to say about it. Amanda looked up. Really? Yes. She could give me money and you wouldn't care? It's hers. Then why is this different? Because she thought she was paying for care. Amanda said nothing. That was the difference no amount of sibling history could erase. The next morning, Grandma forwarded another email thread to me and her attorney. It came from her own account. Mom had sent Dad an updated caregiver agreement months earlier. Mark, can you print this updated copy for Dorothy? Same rate and terms. She wants to continue Amanda's arrangement this year. Dad had replied, Got it. I'll print it tonight. That alone did not prove Dad knew the logs were inaccurate. It proved he knew the arrangement was formal and hourly. I went back through the family group chat from the same period. One exchange stood out. Amanda. Can't take Grandma tomorrow. Client moved setup. Me. I can do it. I'll pick her up at 10. Dad. Thanks for taking her, Sarah. Another month. Amanda. I'm stuck downtown. Can somebody cover? Me. I'll take her. Dad. Appreciate it. Dad knew Amanda was being paid under an hourly agreement. Dad knew I was regularly covering appointments. He might not have known Mom was placing my trips on Amanda's time logs, but he could no longer claim he had no idea the arrangement and reality overlapped. I called him. I saw the renewal email. He was quiet. What renewal email? The one Mom sent you to print for Grandma. Oh. You knew the terms. I knew there was an agreement. You knew the rate? I didn't memorize it. That's not what I asked. Sarah, what do you want from me? I want you to stop saying you weren't involved. I wasn't. You printed the agreement. That doesn't mean I managed it. You saw Amanda cancel. Yes. You thanked me for covering. Yes. You knew she was being paid by the hour. Generally. And none of that made you curious? He sighed. I assumed your mother had it handled. That is the problem. No, the problem is that you're trying to make everyone responsible for details they didn't manage. You didn't need to manage the details. You only needed to notice that two things were true at the same time. What two things? Amanda was being paid to do care. Yes, and I was doing some of the care she was scheduled to do. Dad was silent. I continued. You didn't have to know the logs were wrong. You just had to care enough to ask whether they were right. His voice became defensive. I wasn't going to accuse your mother of something every time plans changed. I didn't ask you to accuse her. Then what? Look. Dad went quiet again. Then he said, I don't want to fight with you. That has been your answer to almost everything. That isn't fair. Maybe. I was tired, but not wanting a fight doesn't make you neutral. He ended the conversation not long after that. I did not feel good about it. I also did not regret it. Amanda called me that evening. Her voice was tight. Did you give Grandma the screenshots? Yes. You said you would. I did. Mom knows. I assumed she eventually would. She's furious. I'm sure. She says you're trying to turn Grandma against her. That is not what's happening. That is exactly what she thinks is happening. What do you think is happening? Amanda went quiet. I think Mom made mistakes. Mistakes? Yes. Do you think the March 6th mileage was a mistake? I don't know. Do you think telling you not to mention the monthly amount was a mistake? She knew you'd react. So she deliberately hid it. She didn't owe you every detail. No, but she was also using me to cover the work. Amanda exhaled sharply. Please don't destroy Mom over this. I stopped. I was standing in our living room. Ethan was reading across from me. He looked up when my expression changed. What did you say? Amanda's voice softened. You heard me. Why do you think the truth destroys her? Silence. I waited. Amanda? Because she did this for me. The sentence landed harder than I expected. Not because it proved Mom's intent. We still needed to establish exactly what Susan had authorized, entered, and paid. But because it told me Amanda had finally stopped pretending this was only about bookkeeping. She knew Mom had bent something for her. She knew enough to be afraid of what happened if Grandma looked closely. And now that Amanda understood the records might cost her money and cost Mom control, she had made her choice. I closed my eyes. Then she has to answer for what she did. You don't have to push it. I'm not the one who requested the accounting. But you're helping. Yes. You could stop. I looked at Ethan, then toward the kitchen, where the copies of Grandma's records sat in a closed folder. Months earlier, I might have heard Amanda's request as an invitation to keep peace. Now I heard the actual bargain. Grandma keeps the loss. Mom keeps the authority. Amanda keeps the money. Everyone else calls it family. No, I said. Amanda went quiet. I continued. I'm not going to make Grandma carry the cost of keeping the rest of us comfortable. Then I ended the call. By that point, the accounting had already shown us that the records were wrong. Amanda's own messages had shown us that Mom knew I was covering while deliberately keeping the payment amount from me. And Amanda had shown me something the documents could not. She had been given a chance to choose transparency after she knew what happened. She chose protection instead. The only question left was how much that choice was going to cost all three of them. By the time we sat down for the family meeting, Grandma had already done the one thing Mom had spent weeks insisting she was too confused to do. She had made a decision about her own money. 3 days earlier, Dorothy had signed the written revocation her attorney prepared. Susan had been formally notified. The bank and the other financial institutions connected to Grandma's accounts had been sent the proper notice, and the attorney had already begun setting up a professional bill pay and fiduciary service to replace the informal system Mom had controlled for years. None of that happened because Grandma announced it at a kitchen table. It happened because she understood what she was changing, signed the documents, and followed the process. I was not the new financial agent. That was intentional. When Grandma first asked whether I would consider taking over, I told her I would help her understand statements or sit with her during meetings. But I did not want the authority Mom had just lost. For once, I did not want to solve the problem by becoming the replacement part. The meeting took place in a conference room at Grandma's attorney's office in early September. It was not a courtroom. There was no judge. No one was about to be arrested. The attorney had been very clear about that before we arrived. The purpose was to lay out the discrepancies, give Susan and Amanda an opportunity to explain them, and determine whether the disputed payments could be resolved without forcing Grandma into civil litigation. Ethan came with me, but he sat slightly back from the table. He was there because I wanted him there, not because he had a role in the accounting. Grandma sat beside her attorney. Mom and Dad arrived together. Amanda arrived 5 minutes later and sat on Mom's other side. No one hugged. No one made small talk. Mom looked at Grandma first, not at me. You didn't have to do this like this. Grandma folded her hands in front of her. You mean with records? I mean through a lawyer. I asked you for the records before I called one. Mom looked toward the attorney. This family did not need an attorney. Grandma answered before anyone else could. This money did. The attorney did not react to the tension. She opened a folder. Before we discuss individual entries, I want to make a few things clear. Dorothy requested this accounting. Dorothy requested the review of the financial power of attorney. Dorothy requested the independent capacity evaluation. Dorothy also instructed me to prepare the revocation she signed earlier this week. Mom's head turned sharply toward Grandma. You revoked it? Grandma held her gaze. Yes. You did that without talking to me? I talked to you for months. You never told me you were actually going to remove me. I didn't need your permission. Mom stared at her. Then she looked at me. There it was. The instinct I had expected. This is you. I did not answer immediately. Grandma did. No. Mom turned back. Dorothy. No, Susan. You are not going to do this again. Mom's face tightened. Do what? Talk about Sarah because you do not like what I decided. I'm trying to protect you. From what? Mom gestured at the files. From this. Grandma leaned forward. Those are my records. Mom looked at the attorney. She forgets things. The attorney opened another document. That concern is exactly why Dorothy agreed to an independent evaluation. Mom went still. The attorney continued. The assessment noted normal age-related forgetfulness. It also found that Dorothy understood her assets, the people involved, the authority she had granted, and the consequences of changing that authority at the time of evaluation. Mom looked at Grandma. You went and had yourself tested? Grandma's expression hardened. You kept telling everyone I was confused every time I disagreed with you. I wanted someone independent to answer the question. That doesn't mean... It means I knew what I was signing when I removed you. Mom stopped. Not because she agreed. Because there was nowhere useful to go after that without openly arguing that Grandma should not be allowed to make the very decision the assessment said she understood. The attorney shifted the conversation. This meeting is not about whether Amanda ever helped Dorothy. She did. The records support that. No one is disputing all caregiver compensation. Amanda nodded quickly. Exactly. The attorney looked at her. But some payments and reimbursements are not supported by the records we reviewed. Mom crossed her arms. Bookkeeping mistakes. Some may be. Then why are we treating this like theft? Grandma spoke. I have never used that word. You don't have to. Mom looked at me. She has been treating us like criminals for weeks. I met her eyes. I have not called you a criminal. You built the spreadsheet. Yes. You dug through everything. Grandma asked me to help compare the records. Mom laughed once. Of course she did. The attorney stepped in. We can argue about personalities later. Right now, the records. She put the caregiver agreement on the table. First, the agreement. $28 per hour. Actual caregiving work. Monthly time and task logs. Mileage reimbursed separately based on actual travel for Dorothy. Mom said, We all know what it says. The attorney looked at her. Good. Then we can agree that payment was not a flat monthly retainer for being available. Mom did not answer. I saw Amanda look at her. That silence mattered. For more than a year, Mom had described the arrangement to me as though Grandma was basically paying Amanda to keep her calendar open. The agreement did not say that. The attorney moved to the March 6th entry. 4 hours of transportation and appointment assistance were paid under Amanda's name. Amanda looked down. The attorney continued. The family group chat shows Amanda canceled that morning. Sarah agreed to take Dorothy. Sarah's work calendar shows the time blocked. Dorothy's patient portal confirms the appointment. Dorothy's appointment book names Sarah. There is also a mileage reimbursement under Amanda's name for the route between Dorothy's home and the clinic. Mom immediately said, I probably copied the wrong name. Grandma looked at her. Probably? I handled months of these forms. So who entered the mileage? I don't remember. That is not the same as me being confused. Mom's mouth tightened. The attorney kept going. Another mileage reimbursement has the same issue. Amanda did not drive the trip. The group chat shows she canceled. Sarah covered. Amanda spoke quietly. I didn't submit the mileage. The attorney looked at her. That is part of what we are here to clarify. Amanda turned to Mom. Did you? Mom's expression flashed with irritation. I handled the forms based on what you sent me. Amanda straightened. I never sent you mileage for trips I didn't drive. Mom stared at her. Do you remember every text you sent? No. Then don't act certain. I watched Amanda's face. For the first time, she looked less like Mom's protected daughter, and more like someone realizing that protection had limits. The attorney put another document down. Now the messages Amanda voluntarily provided. Mom's head snapped toward Amanda. You gave them her texts? Amanda's cheeks flushed. I showed Sarah what you told me. You gave private messages to an attorney? I was trying to prove you told me Grandma approved the payments. Mom looked genuinely betrayed. That was between us. Amanda's voice tightened. You told me Grandma approved everything. She did, Grandma said. Not everything. Mom ignored her. The attorney read the relevant exchange without dramatizing it. Amanda, I can't make Thursday. Susan. Sarah will go. Then Susan. Don't bring up the monthly amount with Sarah. She'll turn it into an argument. Mom looked at me. That was about avoiding exactly this. I almost laughed. You mean avoiding me asking how someone was being paid for work I was doing? It was none of your business what Amanda earned. That part was not my business. I leaned forward. But you were using me as the backup while deliberately keeping me from understanding how the arrangement worked. I never forced you to go anywhere. No, that was true, and I have never said you did. Mom looked almost relieved. Then I continued. But you knew I was covering appointments. You also knew the agreement paid Amanda for actual hours. Those are the two facts you kept separate depending on who you were talking to. Mom shook her head. You are twisting this. The attorney moved to the next message. Amanda asked, Is Grandma really okay paying this much? Susan replied, She wants you stable. Don't overthink it. Grandma looked at Mom. That is not an answer to Amanda's question. Mom turned toward her. You told me you wanted her stable. I did. You said you wanted her to be able to keep helping. Yes. Then what exactly did I do wrong? Grandma's voice remained calm. You decided that because I wanted to help Amanda, you could decide how much of my money counted as help. That is not what happened. You turned support into caregiver expense. I was managing the account. You were supposed to manage it for me. I did. No. Grandma placed one hand on the agreement. You managed it according to what you thought was fair between my granddaughters. Mom's face changed. The attorney set out the 2 care availability advance transfers. These amounts require explanation because the caregiver agreement does not provide for general living expense advances. Mom looked at the pages. They were related to care. How? Amanda needed her car. Amanda looked at her. Mom continued. If she couldn't make the payment, she would lose the car. If she lost the car, she couldn't drive Dorothy. The attorney asked, did Dorothy specifically authorize that car payment as a caregiver expense? Mom hesitated. She wanted Amanda stable. Grandma leaned back. There it is again. Mom looked at her. What? You keep answering what you thought I meant instead of what I said. Susan's eyes filled with anger. I spent years helping you. I handled your bills, your insurance, your Medicare paperwork, repairs, statements, taxes. Every letter you didn't understand came to me. I know. And now you sit there acting like I stole from you because I helped Amanda with a car payment? I did not say you stole from me. You keep hiding behind that sentence. Grandma looked tired now. Not confused. Tired. I am saying you used my money to solve a problem I did not agree to solve that way. Mom looked at me again. Of course she did. You wanted this. I shook my head. No. You've resented Amanda for years. That is convenient. You think she gets everything. I think you keep making decisions based on the assumption that she needs more and I can do without. Because it's true. The room went quiet. Mom realized too late that she had said it plainly. I did not move. She continued anyway. Amanda does need more. You have a career. You have Ethan. You have savings. You are fine. There it was. The logic beneath everything. Not hidden. Not complicated. Just familiar. I said. And that gave you the right to use Grandma's money however you thought would balance us? That is not what I said. It is exactly what you said. I said Amanda needed help. Grandma spoke. And I was the person whose account you used to provide it. Mom looked at her. You wanted to help her too. I did. Grandma's voice softened. If I had decided to give Amanda $10,000 as a gift, that would have been my decision. Amanda looked at Grandma. Grandma continued. But if I paid for care, I had the right to know whether the care happened. Amanda's eyes dropped. That is what you took from me, Susan. Not just money, the decision. Mom sat back. For the first time since the meeting began, she had nothing immediate to say. Dad had been almost completely silent. That was ending. The attorney placed the renewal email in front of him. Mark, you were sent the caregiver agreement for renewal. Dad looked at it. I printed it. You knew Amanda was paid under an hourly agreement. I knew she was paid. The attorney brought up the group chat. On multiple occasions, Amanda canceled. Sarah covered. You replied, thanking Sarah. Dad looked at me. I remember. I leaned forward. So you knew she was being paid? Yes. You knew I was covering. Sometimes. Yes. And you never asked whether the paid hours changed. I didn't manage the paperwork. That is not what I asked. Dad's face tightened. I trusted your mother. I know. Was I supposed to audit my own wife? No. I kept my voice steady. You were supposed to notice when 2 facts sitting in front of you did not fit. He shook his head. I didn't know the logs were wrong. I believe you. That surprised him. I continued. But you knew enough to ask. He looked away. Mom jumped in. Leave him out of this. Dad looked at her. No. She turned. What? No. She's right about that part. Mom stared at him. Dad rubbed one hand over his face. I saw the agreement. I knew Sarah covered some things. I assumed you fixed the hours. Mom's voice sharpened. I did. Then why are there still paid entries? I said there were mistakes. Dad looked at the mileage form. Twice? Mom stared at him as though he had betrayed her by noticing. I understood something then. Dad's role in our family had always depended on someone else absorbing the discomfort. Usually me. Sometimes Grandma. Almost always, Mom handled the decisions while Dad handled the peace afterward. Now there was no peace available, only a record. The attorney closed the evidence folder. We have enough to establish disputed amounts. We are not resolving every dollar today. Dorothy's position is straightforward. Compensation supported by actual care remains compensation. Unsupported hours, mileage reimbursements, and expenses that exceeded what Dorothy authorized need to be repaid or otherwise resolved. Amanda looked frightened. How much? We are still finalizing the disputed total. Mom said. This is absurd. The attorney continued. If the parties cannot reach an agreement, Dorothy can pursue civil recovery. She has asked us to attempt a negotiated resolution first. Mom looked at Grandma. You would sue your own family? Grandma's face barely moved. I asked my own family to explain my money. That is not an answer. It is the only one you need today. The meeting ended without a settlement. That was another thing reality refused to do for drama. No one signed a check at the table. No judge declared a winner. No one walked out ruined. Susan and Amanda were advised to obtain their own counsel before negotiating repayment. Mom left furious. Dad followed more slowly. Amanda stayed behind long enough to ask Grandma one question. Do you think I stole from you? Grandma looked at her for several seconds. I think you knew enough to ask whether something was wrong. Amanda's face crumpled. I did ask, Mom. Yes, I believed her. At first I understand that. Amanda swallowed. And later? Grandma answered gently. Later you asked Sarah to stop looking because the money was already gone. Amanda looked down. Grandma continued. That is the part you have to live with. Amanda left without another word. 2 weeks later, we met with a mediator. I did not sit through every hour of negotiation. Grandma's attorney handled the legal pieces. Susan and Amanda had counsel. The numbers were reviewed against task logs, mileage forms, bank records, appointment dates, and the messages Amanda had voluntarily provided. The result was not as simple as Mom had feared or Amanda had hoped. Amanda kept every dollar tied to care she could support. That included plenty. Groceries, companionship, actual transportation, home errands, legitimate appointment assistance. No one erased the work she had done. But the unsupported hours and mileage did not disappear just because she had done other things correctly. Those amounts became part of the settlement. The care availability advances were handled separately because Grandma had authorized some general help for Amanda, but not all of it as caregiver expense. Susan accepted responsibility for part of those improperly classified payments. There was no dramatic six-figure judgment. The disputed amount was large enough to hurt, not large enough to destroy anyone. Amanda could not repay her portion in a lump sum, so the written settlement gave her a monthly repayment plan. Mom agreed to repay her assigned portion as well. She also formally relinquished any remaining role in Grandma's financial management, though the power of attorney had already been revoked. The professional fiduciary arrangement stayed in place. When the settlement was signed, Mom asked to speak to me in the hallway. I almost said no. Then I followed her out. She stood near a window, overlooking the parking lot. Are you happy now? I looked at her. No. She gave a bitter laugh. That's convincing. You think I wanted Grandma to find out she couldn't trust you with this? You wanted me to lose control. I wanted Grandma to have control. That's a nice line. It's also true. Mom folded her arms. You always thought you were better than Amanda. I felt strangely calm. No. She rolled her eyes. I just finally stopped agreeing to be worth less. Her face changed. I continued before she could answer. You kept acting like fairness meant Amanda got whatever she needed because I would survive without it. My time. My credit. Grandma's money. It was always the same calculation. You survived. That is not the standard. Mom looked away. I said, and I'm not protecting you from what you chose anymore. She turned back. You have no idea what I chose. I know enough. You know documents. I know you told Amanda not to tell me how much she was being paid while you were using me to cover the work. I never used you. You counted on me. You chose to help your grandmother. Yes. I never forced you. I know. Mom seemed almost confused by my agreement. I continued. That's why this isn't about whether I volunteered. It's about what you did after I did. She had no answer for that. I left her in the hallway. When I came back into the conference room, Grandma was signing the final page of the settlement packet. She looked smaller than she had at the wedding. Not weaker, just tired. She handed the pen back to the attorney. Then she looked at me. What happens now? Months earlier, I would have answered with a list. Account changes, care schedule, repayment dates. Who should call whom? What needed to be fixed next? This time, I sat beside her. Now you decide what you want your life to look like. Grandma nodded. And for the first time since that blue appointment book opened, there was no one in the room trying to answer for her. The strangest part of what came after was how ordinary it looked from the outside. No one moved out of state. No one stopped speaking to everyone forever. There were no police cars in anyone's driveway. No courtroom photographs. No dramatic announcement that our family had been destroyed. Mom still went grocery shopping. Dad still mowed his lawn on Saturdays. Amanda still posted photos from event jobs. Grandma still complained about the price of prescription drugs and refused to admit that 82 was old enough to accept help carrying laundry downstairs. But the structure underneath all of those ordinary things had changed. Mom noticed it first. For years, people had called her when they needed anything involving Grandma. What time was Dorothy's appointment? Did she want to come to Sunday dinner? Had she paid the property tax bill? Was she still using the same pharmacy? Could she afford the new hearing aids her doctor mentioned? Mom had answers to all of it. Sometimes because Grandma had actually told her. Sometimes because Susan had decided the answer herself. After the settlement, those calls stopped coming to her. Grandma's professional bill pay service handled the financial pieces. Her attorney remained available for anything complicated. I helped only when Grandma asked me directly, and even then I tried not to turn each request into a full operating plan. When Aunt Denise called me one afternoon and asked whether Grandma wanted to attend a cousin's anniversary dinner, I almost said, "I'll check." Then I stopped. "You should call her." Denise hesitated. "Is she up for phone calls?" "Yes." "Your mom usually knows her schedule. Grandma knows her schedule too." There was a silence. Then Denise said, "Right. Of course." That tiny exchange would have meant nothing to anyone outside our family. Inside it, it meant everything. People had become so accustomed to asking Susan what Dorothy wanted that they had stopped noticing they could simply ask Dorothy. Mom noticed too. At Thanksgiving that year, she told my aunt, "Mom doesn't want anything too heavy." Grandma, who was standing 3 feet away, spooning mashed potatoes onto her plate, said, "Mom would like stuffing." Aunt Denise laughed before realizing no one else had. Susan's face tightened. Grandma added stuffing. That was what losing control looked like most of the time. Not humiliation. Correction. Again and again. Mom also had her own portion of the settlement to repay. I never asked Grandma for the exact monthly amount because it was not my money and no longer my problem to supervise. I knew the basic terms because I had been part of the process, but I deliberately stopped tracking whether Susan sent each payment on time. That was harder than it sounds. There were moments when I wanted to know, not because I needed revenge renewed every 30 days, because part of me still believed that if I did not keep watching, something would slip. The first time Grandma mentioned casually that the month's payment had come through, I felt an immediate urge to ask how much. I did not. Instead, I said, "Good." Grandma gave me a knowing look. "You're learning. Don't make it weird." I'm 82. Making things weird is one of the few privileges left to me. She was doing better physically by then. She still used a cane for longer outings, and had days when her hip bothered her enough that she stayed home, but she was no longer living inside a recovery schedule. The care arrangement was rebuilt around what she actually needed. A professional service handled bills. A local transportation service covered some routine appointments. A neighbor she had known for 20 years helped with occasional errands and refused to be paid, which annoyed the attorney enough that Grandma eventually started giving her grocery gift cards. I took Grandma to one specialist appointment every few months because she liked having me there for the more complicated medical conversations. That was my choice. Not a default. Not a role someone had assigned me. Amanda was no longer Grandma's paid caregiver. That decision had been Dorothy's. The old agreement ended when the accounting dispute did. Grandma could have offered Amanda a new one with tighter controls through the professional service, but she chose not to. "I don't want money between us for a while," she told her. Amanda had cried when she heard that. Not dramatically. She just sat at Grandma's kitchen table, looked down at her hands, and cried in a way that made me feel sorry for her even after everything. The caregiver income had become part of how she lived. Not luxury. Stability. When it disappeared and the repayment plan began at the same time, she had to adjust quickly. She picked up more weekend event work. She stopped renting a small storage unit she had used for props and started keeping more equipment in her apartment. She sold a designer bag Mom had given her 2 Christmases earlier. A few months later, she moved from a newer building with covered parking into an older apartment about 10 minutes farther west. Nobody evicted her. Nobody took her car. Nobody ruined her credit. She simply had to live on income she could actually count as hers. That consequence seemed harsher to her than any lecture could have been. For the first few months, she rarely spoke to me except when absolutely necessary. That suited me. I did not hate her. I also did not miss the exhausting process of trying to figure out whether every conversation was going to turn into an argument about who had more, who needed more, or who was being judged. Dad was the first one to ask to meet me privately. It happened in January, about 4 months after the settlement. He texted and asked if I would have coffee with him. I almost declined. Then I decided I wanted to hear what he had to say without Mom beside him. He chose a diner halfway between our houses. When I arrived, he was already there with black coffee and the expression of a man who had been rehearsing sentences for 20 minutes. We ordered. He did not wait for the food. "I owe you an apology." I looked at him. "Okay." He gave a humorless smile. "That's all I get? You haven't apologized yet." He nodded. "Fair." Dad looked down at the table. "I knew Amanda was being paid." "Yes." "I knew you were covering some of the appointments." "Yes." "I did not know Susan was entering hours or mileage that way." "I believe you." He looked up. "I should have asked." I did not answer. I kept telling myself Susan handled Dorothy's finances and that if Grandma was happy, it wasn't my business. I stirred my coffee. She wasn't happy once she knew. "I know." Dad rubbed his thumb along the side of the mug. "The truth is, I didn't want to know enough to have to take a position." That was more honest than anything he had said during the meeting. "I waited," he continued. "Your mother has always been the one who handles conflict. She decides. I smooth things over afterward." "I know." I thought that made me the calm one. I almost smiled. "What does it make you now?" "Laissez." The answer surprised me. He looked at me. "Cowardly sometimes." I did not rescue him from the word. Dad continued. "When she said Amanda needed more help, I agreed because that was easier than asking what it cost everyone else. When you got upset, I thought you would get over it because you always did." There it was again. The family's favorite compliment and favorite excuse. "Sarah can handle it." Dad shook his head. "I'm sorry." I believed him. That did not magically restore anything. "I appreciate you saying it. I know that doesn't fix it." "No." "Do you think you'll ever trust me again?" The question was too large. "I trust you to do some things." He nodded. "That's not what I meant." "I know." I put my spoon down. "Trust isn't a switch. You spent years not looking because looking would have required you to do something. I don't know how long it takes to believe you won't do that again." Dad looked disappointed, but he did not argue. "That's fair." It was one of the first times he accepted an uncomfortable answer without trying to reduce it into peace. We finished coffee. He hugged me in the parking lot. I hugged him back. That was not forgiveness completed. It was simply one honest conversation. Amanda took longer. Her apology came in March. Not face-to-face at first. She sent me a message, asking if she could come by. I told her yes. Ethan happened to be out meeting a friend when she arrived, which made the house feel quieter than usual. Amanda stood in the entryway with her coat still on. "You want coffee?" "No." "Water?" "No." I waited. She took off her coat anyway and sat on the couch. For almost a minute she said nothing. Then she looked at me. "I owe you an apology." I almost laughed. Did Dad start a club? She gave me a weak smile. He told you? Not about you. She looked down. I've had a lot of time to think. I assumed repayment plans encourage reflection. That was mean. A little. I probably deserved it. I sat across from her. Amanda took a breath. I knew you were covering Grandma more than Mom made it sound. I did not interrupt. I knew people exaggerated what I did. Yes, I liked it. That was the first thing she said that surprised me. Not because I had never suspected it. Because she finally said it without defending herself. She continued. I liked being the one everyone called caring. I felt something in my chest tighten. Amanda laughed once, embarrassed. You were always the one who had everything together. The career, the savings, the plans. You were the person people asked when something actually had to get done. That wasn't always fun. I know that now. She rubbed her hands together. I think I liked having one thing where I was better. I said nothing. She looked at me. Not better at caregiving exactly. Better at being loving. That hurt more than I expected, because it explained something I had never been able to articulate. My family had turned competence and affection into opposite categories. I was practical. Amanda was warm. I was reliable. Amanda was sensitive. I solved things. Amanda cared about people, as though those traits could not exist in the same person. Amanda looked away. When Aunt Denise sent those flowers, I knew the card was exaggerated. I know. I could have corrected her. Yes. I didn't. No. I knew you had covered appointments. Yes. And when I asked Mom if Grandma was really okay paying that much, part of me already thought the answer might be no. I leaned back. That's the part I had the hardest time with. I know, because you did ask. Yes. And then you stopped asking when you got the answer you wanted. Amanda's eyes filled. Yes. No excuse. No speech about being poor. No reminder that I earned more. Just yes. I believed that apology more than I would have believed any longer one. She wiped beneath one eye. I am sorry. I nodded. I believe you. Her shoulders lowered. Then I added, I'm not ready to trust you. They went right back up. Okay. I'm not saying never. I know. But saying you're sorry doesn't put us where we were. We weren't exactly in a great place before. That's true. That made both of us smile slightly. Amanda looked toward the window. Grandma says the same thing. What? That being sorry isn't the same as being trusted. She's getting very wise in old age. Amanda rolled her eyes. She already thinks she invented wisdom. That sounds like her. We talked for another half hour. Nothing dramatic. Work. Dad. Grandma. She told me she had picked up a recurring corporate event contract that would make the repayment schedule easier. I told her I was glad. I meant it. When she left, we hugged. That did not mean everything was repaired. It meant I was willing to see what happened next. Mom was different. She never apologized in the same way. She said she was sorry. Everything got so ugly. She said she wished we had handled it privately. She said she had only been trying to help Amanda and Grandma at the same time. She said I had never understood how much pressure she had been under. All of those things might have contained truth. None reached the actual choice she had made. The closest she came was one afternoon when she showed up at Grandma's while I happened to be there. She was returning a box of old tax files the professional service no longer needed her to keep. Grandma thanked her. Mom stood near the doorway. Then she looked at me. I still think you could have handled this differently. I almost asked how. Then I realized I already knew. Quietly, privately, in a way that preserved her authority. I'm sure you do. She frowned. That's all? Yes. She looked disappointed. She had spent years treating conflict as something that ended when everyone accepted her version of why it had happened. I no longer needed that ending. Mom left. Grandma watched the door close. She's going to take longer. Maybe. Do you think she'll ever understand? I thought about it. I don't know. Grandma nodded. Good answer. Her own life had become quieter by spring. The blue appointment book still sat on her desk. She used it differently now. Not because she no longer trusted anyone. Because she wanted to know her own schedule. The professional service sent monthly summaries directly to her. If she wanted help reading them, she asked. Sometimes she asked me. Sometimes Dad. Once she called Ethan, which made him ridiculously proud. She made her own choices about transportation. She decided which appointments she wanted someone to attend. She decided which relatives she wanted visiting and which days she wanted everyone to leave her alone. No one had to win Dorothy. That was the part I had nearly forgotten during the worst of it. She was not the prize. She was the person. The last public part of the conflict happened because Mom could not quite stop telling people her version. By April, 2 relatives had separately repeated some variation of the same sentence to Grandma. Susan says Sarah turned you against her. Grandma told me the first time and laughed. The second time, she stopped laughing. I am tired of apparently being the only person in this family who cannot make a decision without you receiving credit for it. I don't want credit for this one. I know. She picked up her phone. What are you doing? Correcting something. Grandma. She gave me a look. I am not asking permission. I shut my mouth. She typed for several minutes. Then she read the message aloud before sending it to the family group. Sarah did not take control of my finances. I removed Susan's authority after reviewing my own accounts and receiving independent advice. That decision was mine. Please stop telling people otherwise. She looked at me. Too much? No. Too little? No. Good? She sent it. There was no explosion. Aunt Denise replied with a heart. One cousin said, "Understood." Dad wrote, "Thanks, Mom." Mom did not reply. The message sat there. Simple. Clear. Impossible to reinterpret without openly contradicting Dorothy herself. That was the last time I heard anyone say I had turned Grandma against Mom. By June, a year had passed since the wedding. Ethan suggested we do something small for our anniversary. No big party. No recreation of the reception. Just dinner. Grandma came. Dad joined us for part of the evening. Amanda stopped by with flowers and stayed for dessert. Mom was invited. She declined. I did not chase her. The cake was small. Vanilla with lemon filling, almost the same flavor Ethan and I had chosen for the wedding, though that was his idea rather than mine. When he brought it out, Grandma started laughing before it even reached the table. "Oh, that is dangerous." Amanda looked at her. "What?" Grandma pointed toward the cake. "Family history." Ethan set it down. "I considered pie." "Coward," Grandma said. He handed me the knife. "Your anniversary. Your risk." I cut the first slice. For a moment, nobody moved. That was what struck me. Nobody reached for the plate. Nobody suggested who deserved it. Nobody announced a change in tradition. Nobody told me what a good sister should do. Grandma watched me. "So," she said, "who gets it?" I looked at Ethan. He raised both hands. "I learned from last year. I am staying out of this." Amanda laughed. I looked at Grandma, then at the cake. I took the fork, and I ate the first bite myself. Grandma smiled. "Good." Ethan leaned toward me. "Was I not supposed to get that? You'll survive." I've heard that logic before. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the fork. Then I cut the next piece for him. Another for Grandma. Amanda got one after that. There was no speech. There did not need to be. For years, my family had treated my independence like proof that I could afford to lose things. Attention, credit, time, sometimes fairness. The assumption was always that because I could survive without something, giving it to Amanda was harmless. I had believed a version of that too. I told myself that if I did not need the praise, it did not matter who got it. If I could cover the appointment, it did not matter why someone else had failed to. If a family argument was small enough to endure, it was probably easier to endure it than correct it. What changed after my wedding was not that I became less generous. I still helped Grandma. I still loved Dad. I was slowly rebuilding something with Amanda. I even loved Mom, though loving her no longer meant letting her define what fairness looked like. What changed was simpler. I stopped believing that strength was an agreement to receive less. The first slice had never really been about cake. It had been about who got to decide what belonged to me. A year later, the answer finally felt obvious. I did. You should never confuse being strong with being available for everyone to use. If your family keeps taking your time, credit, money, or choices because you can handle it, Set boundaries and ask for records when facts do not match the story you are being told. Helping someone is generous. Letting others decide what you should give up is not. You can love your family without protecting them from the consequences of their choices. Respect should include honesty, accountability, and consent. If this story gave you something to think about, subscribe to the channel for more family stories and lessons.